Last year, my laptop broke and I really needed a new one. I looked around online and also went to Best Buy, but then I had the idea to look on Facebook Marketplace as well. It seemed like it could be the cheapest and fastest option. I didn't need it to be brand new, and I also didn't want to wait for the shipping time of buying a used one online. So I looked to Facebook Marketplace of people that were close to me. Luckily, I live in an area with quite a few other people. I was able to find the laptop that I wanted and found one for a reasonable price as well. It was not too far away, and I contacted the seller and said that I would like to buy it as soon as possible. The seller got back to me a short time later and told me that I could come over to his house. I didn't like this idea though. Possibly nothing bad would happen and it would be fine, but I didn't want to go to a random guy's house. I responded to him and said that I would rather meet in a public location that was in the area. The man asked why, and I said that I just didn't want to go to someone's house that I didn't know. After a little more of a conversation through Facebook messaging, he finally agreed. He gave me a name of a local restaurant to meet him at and said that he would be there at 9 p.m. I agreed and then went to withdraw some cash. I wasn't all that happy that the man wanted to meet at 9 o'clock at night, but at least it was a public location. I had never been to the restaurant before where he wanted to meet, but that night I drove there, and it was a smaller and older looking place. There was nothing else really that close to it, and it was kind of away from the other businesses in the area. The parking lot was in the back, and I parked and then messaged the seller, letting him know that I was there. He responded saying to come inside. After that, I got out of my car and walked inside the restaurant. The place seemed pretty old, and also appeared to be more of a bar than a restaurant. I found a small open table and sat down at a stool and looked around. I couldn't tell where the guy was. His profile picture from Facebook was not of himself, but a logo of a sports team. I looked around to see if there was a guy with a laptop or by himself, but I didn't see anybody. I messaged him, saying that I was there and inside, and asked him where he was. A couple of minutes went by, and I still didn't see him, and he didn't reply either. Finally, after about 5 minutes, I got a notification that he responded. When I read it, he said that he was sorry, but he couldn't make it. I was really confused. He had just texted me earlier telling me to come on inside as if he was there. Now he says he's not going to make it? I was frustrated and decided to just leave. I didn't even want to buy the laptop from him anymore. The guy was just too weird. I was sure that there were plenty of other good laptops for sale, and I wouldn't have a problem finding another one. So I got up and left the bar. I headed out to my car in the parking lot behind the bar and then got inside. Then I started to drive back home. The bar was maybe 15 minutes from my house, and when I got back onto the roads, they were very quiet. But after beginning to drive home, a car left the bar right behind me. I thought nothing of it at first, but the more I drove, it remained right on my tail. After making several turns, it didn't seem like a coincidence anymore. It seemed like whoever was driving that car was deliberately following me, especially because of the fact that they were following really close behind, and if I went faster or slower, they would maintain about the same speed as I was going. When I got within 5 minutes of my apartment, I started to really worry. But part of me was just telling myself, there's no way this car is actually following me. It's just me being paranoid. It was a pickup truck that was following me, and about average size. I really could just see the headlights though, and couldn't tell who was behind the wheel. Finally, I made it to the turnoff for my apartment. I lived in a pretty large complex that had multiple buildings and a huge parking lot. When I pulled in, so did the truck. That was my worst fear. I drove through the parking lot but did not stop. Instead, I drove all the way through and then left the parking lot on the other side. The truck also left with me. At that point, it was pretty much confirmed 100% to me that I was being followed. My adrenaline was rushing and I was desperate to lose the car. But still, I knew better than to speed or drive recklessly. Instead, I started turning onto random streets and into random businesses and restaurant parking lots. Then I would exit out the other side and go back onto the road. It was probably very clear to whoever was behind me now that I knew they were following me and I was trying to lose them. This went on for quite some time though, probably 30 minutes. Soon though, my light came on signaling that I needed to get gas soon. I got really worried. I couldn't keep this up for much longer. The truck was still right on my tail. I kept doing what I was doing and would probably be able to go for about 40 more miles or so. Then, when I made a turn, the truck just went the other way. I couldn't believe it, but it was finally over. I guess he finally gave up. After the truck drove away, I went and got some gas and then went back to my apartment. I was very careful the entire time, and I did not see the truck for the rest of the drive. After getting back home, I realized that the driver of the truck was likely the seller of the laptop. I hadn't really thought about it when I was being followed, but it all made sense now. He told me that he was inside the bar to try to get me to go in. I went back to look at the listing, and it was now gone. The user had blocked me as well, whoever he was. I was a little bit worried, because originally I did drive to my apartment complex, but I just hoped that he thought it was the first of all the random places that I turned in to lose him. He also wouldn't know which building I lived in or which unit was mine. Luckily, though, I never saw him again. I also haven't used Facebook Marketplace since that incident. I went to the Home Depot several months ago and had an experience with a creepy guy. I normally don't shop at the Home Depot. In fact, it was my first time there in almost a year. Normally, I just stick to stores like Target, Walmart, and Home Goods. But I was looking for a new rug, and also some things around the house like light bulbs. I had no luck finding them in other stores. When I went to the Home Depot, it was probably a little bit after 8 p.m. and was dark outside. I had been to some other stores beforehand. Things were very quiet when I walked inside. As you know, the store is massive, but some coworkers and a few shoppers were around here and there. I decided not to find an employee and ask them for help, and instead look around on my own. I wasn't that familiar with the store and where everything was, but I could figure it out on my own. So as I walked around, I made my way towards the back end of the store. I was looking around at the rug selection, and that's when this one guy came over by me. I didn't know who he was and had never seen him before. He had dark hair and was wearing jeans and a gray jacket. When he first approached me as I browsed, I thought that it might be an employee, but when I looked at him, I realized that he wasn't. I didn't think much of it and figured he was also just looking around the same general area. But I soon left to go over and find some light bulbs. He literally walked right behind me the entire time, maybe 5 feet back. We both went the entire way. Then, in the light bulb aisle, I looked, and the man seemed to be looking right next to me. There was no way this was just a coincidence. It kind of seemed weird to me. I started walking away to another aisle, and when I did, the man followed. I really couldn't believe it, to be honest. I got into a random aisle and went down it. Of course, the man did the same thing. That's when I stopped and turned around and faced him. He stopped as well and looked at me, with a surprised look on his face. I asked him why he was following me all around the store. The man completely denied it. He said, "I'm just trying to shop." Then, he shook his head and started looking at a random item on the shelf. I was furious, but just walked away out of the aisle. When I did, the man stayed where he was. I knew that he was following me around, but I just didn't know why. Maybe he thought it was funny or was just trying to annoy me or something. He had finally stopped though, so I was happy to see that. I finished looking around and wasn't there for much longer. I probably spent another 10 minutes or so inside the store, all without seeing the guy at all. I'm not sure where he went, but I didn't care. I finished and went to check out. There, I paid for the few things that I got. I didn't end up getting a rug, but some other small items that I needed to get. Then I left the store and walked out to my car. I made it about halfway there when I just looked behind me. I'm not really sure why. I didn't hear footsteps or anything, but I guess it was just instincts. I saw the man once again, and he was walking towards me in the dark parking lot about 50 feet away. When I saw this, I went fast and unlocked my car. I didn't bother to look back again because I didn't want to know if the guy was running or anything. I just went as fast as I could to my driver's door, got inside, then put the car into drive and left. Luckily, nobody was in the parking space directly in front of me or anything. I could just peel away. I didn't see the man at all. I don't know if he had gotten closer to me or stopped going after me or what. When I made it out of the parking lot, I made sure that I wasn't followed home. Looking back, I don't know who that guy was and what he was doing. It was very obvious that he was following me around. For what reason, I still don't know. I haven't been back to the Home Depot since. I'm a former movie theater employee. The one that I worked at I would describe as very typical. It was near a shopping center about 10 minutes away from where I lived. At the time, I was a high school senior and 18 years old. One night, I was working there until 11 p.m. I believe it was a weekend, and I know that it had been pretty busy. As it got to be a little bit later at night, things got quieter. I'm not sure exactly what time it was, but I know that one of the theaters ended its last movie for the night. I was sent to go and clean it about 30 minutes after the movie ended. The theater wasn't all that big, so it probably wouldn't take me too long. Usually, there was some trash left behind, and popcorn on the floor and things like that. When I entered the empty theater, I started cleaning up, first closer to the screen. It was a little messier than I thought it would be. I worked my way up, and probably about 10 minutes later, I was looking down at the floor and cleaning, when suddenly, something hit the ground right in front of me. I saw that it was a cup that appeared to be empty. I had no idea where it had come from. I looked up towards the top of the theater. When I did, I saw nothing. But I knew that somebody else had to be in there to throw that at me. I called out, asking who was there, but got nothing in response. Then I started to walk up an aisle towards the top of the theater. When I made it about halfway up, I saw a man suddenly stand up and appear from behind the second to last row. He had a strange-looking beard and long hair. Before I had a chance to say anything, I saw him wind up and throw something at me again. I ducked, and what appeared to be an almost empty water bottle flew past my head. I stood up and asked the guy what he was doing. I kind of thought that he was joking around at first. He was standing up and facing me, but still didn't say anything. I saw that based on the seemingly angry look on his face, he was not joking around. I told him that we were closing soon and I needed to clean, so he had to go. The man's response to this was to start to take a few steps closer to me. Then, without saying anything, he began running towards me at full speed. I knew nothing else but to run away from the guy. I sprinted down the stairs and then out of the theater back into the hallway. When I got out there, I noticed that the guy didn't leave the theater. He was still inside. This would pose a problem with me being able to clean it. I walked down the hallway back towards the front until I found a coworker. I found a guy named Cal who was one of my coworkers, and after I told him about the guy, we decided to go back. I felt like it would be easier for the two of us to get the guy to leave than just one. If he still refused, then we would probably have to call the police on him. We both entered the theater, but didn't go in very far. We remained just a few feet away from the door in case the guy tried anything. We couldn't see anything at all, but I was pretty sure that the guy was still in there. We yelled out that he had to go now, and if he didn't leave, we would have to call the police. At first, it was just silence. Then, suddenly, we heard a noise. It was coming from above us, and I looked up. The railing from the stairs of the aisle was above us and directly to the left. I saw the guy for a second, and a bunch of popcorn falling down on us like snow. He had dumped it over the rails right onto us. We both left the theater after that, and then called the police. We waited by the entrance for the next 10 minutes or so, and the guy didn't leave. When the police got there, we told them where the guy was. It took them a while, but eventually they were able to get him to leave the theater. I'm not sure what his problem was. The guy clearly had some issues. I'm just glad that he didn't actually cause any harm to the theater or employees. Later on, I found out that he never bought a ticket to a movie and had snuck in towards the end of a film. I guess he stayed in there towards the back, and when the movie was over, continued to stay in until I went in to clean. I worked at the theater for a few months after that, before quitting. A few months ago, I was working at my cashier job in the self-checkout when I encountered a very strange customer. It started when a somewhat disheveled man, who looked to be in his 60s, waved me over to his register for help. He began asking me for help ringing up his items, claiming he couldn't find the barcodes. I found this a little bit odd, but initially I tried not to judge him. I thought that maybe he just had impaired vision or some other disability. He only had 2 items, a drink and a candy bar. I helped him scan both items, but it soon became readily apparent that he had only asked me for help as an excuse to have my attention. He kept chuckling, and it wasn't an innocent or friendly chuckle, but one that sounded unhinged. I realized that he was very likely under the influence of something. I started mentally plotting my end to my interaction as quickly as possible. He also kept asking for my number, which I just awkwardly laughed off every time. I had to walk him through the payment process too, since he of course also pretended not to know how to use the card reader in order to prolong the interaction. When all of that was finally over and he paid and walked off, I assumed that he left. No such luck. About 2 hours later, it was time for my lunch break. As I was heading towards the break room, I saw the man again. He motioned for me to go over to him. I told him as politely as I could, "Sir, I'm not on the clock right now. I'm headed to my lunch break. You have a nice night." I quickened my pace on my walk to the break room, looking over my shoulder the whole way until I passed through the doors to the employees-only area. My lunch break went normal, and for a while, my time back at work after that did too. That is, until around 2.5 more hours later. I suddenly heard one of our store security guards yelling. He said, "Sir, I'm going to call the police if you don't leave. You're harassing my customers. You're harassing my employees. You cannot be here." When I looked in the direction of the yelling, lo and behold, the same guy yet again was the one being yelled at. I saw him run towards the back of the store and security chase after him. I wasn't able to leave my area, and I had to concentrate on my job, so I just presumed shortly after that they caught him and escorted him out. One of my other coworkers, who witnessed this, told me that they'd been trying to kick that guy out for hours, and that earlier he had been hitting on another female coworker of mine, who I will refer to as Lacey. She didn't elaborate on what happened with Lacey, so I just figured that the guy had pulled the same thing on Lacey as he did on me. All of this had been weird and uncomfortable already. A few days later, however, I found out more details about the situation that almost made my blood run cold. While on lunch break, I was making conversation with a work friend of mine who I will call Vera. I asked Vera, "Did you hear about the creepy guy who was here on Saturday night?" She told me that she had not only heard about it, but witnessed much of his deranged behavior. She told me that when the man tried to flirt with Lacey, Lacey firmly told him that she was a minor. His reply, "That's okay, I like 13-year-old girls." This made Lacey feel so unsafe and anxious that she ended up going home early because of it. I told Vera that the man had tried to flirt with me too, and Vera pointed out to me that the creep had probably gone for me based on the fact that I look very young for my age. I realized Vera was probably completely right about this. I'm currently in my late 20s, but I can pass for a teen and often get mistaken for one. Vera then told me that the man didn't end up leaving the store until midnight when it closed, and even then, he stood outside in the parking lot for hours after that. I thought back to what time it had been when I first encountered the man on Saturday, and I calculated that he must have been in the store for over 8 hours at least, seemingly doing little more than creepily flirting with all the young women he came across. To top off all of this, I usually walk home, but that night, one of my coworkers happened to give me a ride. If she hadn't done this, I almost definitely would have encountered the man in the parking lot, and who knows how that would have gone.
This happened just a couple of weeks ago when I went to Walmart one night. I think it was about 8 o'clock, and I went there to only get a few things. When I got inside the store, it seemed pretty normal to me. It wasn't too busy, and it wasn't completely dead either. I didn't waste any time and started walking to the right. The first thing on my list was to get some more soap. As I was walking down that way, I remember seeing a man walking in the opposite direction. He was wearing a shirt that said "Human Mammal" on it. I specifically remember seeing that. But afterwards, I passed him by and kept walking. After getting the soap, I then headed towards the back end of the store. I was over there getting the last several items, and it took me a little bit over 5 minutes. Then I headed back towards the front end of the store. When I made it a little more than halfway to the front, that particular area was very quiet. But there was one person there, and they caught my attention. It was the man that I had seen earlier, and he was standing in a random aisle, just pushing things off the shelf. It was like he was trying to make a mess. The man had slightly long dark hair, was somewhat big, and a little bit less than 6 feet tall. When I saw him doing this, I couldn't help but look. I was going to just keep walking past him, but when I got kind of close to him, I stopped. The man looked at me as he continued throwing things on the floor. I asked him what he was doing. I didn't say it in a way as if I worked at Walmart or as if I was mad at him. I was just genuinely curious. The man looked at me as I spoke, but did not stop his actions. After my question, he looked away and completely ignored me. I looked around and did not see any employees in the immediate area. When I looked back to the man, he was giving me the middle finger. I thought about saying something to the guy, but decided not to and just walked away. Somebody would see what he was doing soon enough, and he would probably get kicked out of the store or banned. I walked the rest of the way over to the self-checkouts. Then I checked out and started to leave. Well, I guess as I was checking out, the man in the human mammal shirt walked over to me without me knowing, because as soon as I was walking into the parking lot, I looked back and saw the guy walking behind me. He was like 50 feet back, and at first, I wasn't sure if he just happened to be leaving at the same time as me or not. I don't even know why I decided to look behind me, but I'm glad that I did. The guy appeared to be looking right at me, which was strange, but I ignored it. I continued as normal and got to my car, unlocked it, and went inside. I wasn't in a rush to leave or anything, but when I started the engine and was getting ready to back out, I saw him. The human mammal had followed me all the way to my car and was now standing right behind it. He was looking at me through the rear window of my vehicle. I waited for about a minute, and he didn't move at all. Then I rolled down my window and yelled to the guy, asking him to move. He ignored me completely. He just stood there with barely any expression on his face. This guy was really confusing to me. I honked my horn, and he still didn't move. So then, I turned my engine off and got out of my car. At first, the man still didn't move. I asked him what his problem was, and he still ignored me. I wasn't really sure what to do. I didn't want to get in the guy's face or anything because he seemed sort of unpredictable. I decided to walk back inside Walmart. As I went through the parking lot, the man calmly walked behind me, following me yet again. By the time I made it to the doors, he was maybe 10 feet behind me. When I walked inside, I wasn't really sure where to go, so I just started walking. But when I made it sort of past the self-checkouts, I saw a few employees standing around. The man behind me was still about 10 feet back, and one of the employees approached him. He tried to walk past, but another employee walked in front of him. I heard that they were confronting him about throwing things off the shelves of the aisles. Somebody must have seen him, or possibly he was seen on security cameras. This allowed me to get away from the guy, and I turned around and left the store while he was still there. This time, he wasn't able to follow me. I left and haven't seen him since. Hopefully he was banned from the store or something. I'm really not sure why he did all of that. It was like he was just trying to cause problems.
I used to work at Target a couple of years ago. I worked inside the store on the sales floor and mostly on the grocery side. During this time, I was a part-time employee and I worked maybe 20 to 30 hours a week. One night, I was working a pretty standard shift for me. It was from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. When it started, things were kind of busy. I would move all around one side of the store and do whatever I needed to, mainly stock shelves or organize things. I also answered customer questions and told them where certain items were if they wanted to know. I'd been working there for about 6 months at the time, and I knew the store like the back of my hand. So fast forward to about 9:30 p.m. or so that night. By then, the store had become very quiet. We were open until 11 p.m. back then, so we were not about to close, but it was still very quiet. Many of my coworkers had left, and the overnight team was beginning to arrive. On the grocery side, though, it was easy to stay busy. That side always had more shoppers, so it required more attention. All of the employees at Target carry a walkie-talkie for communication. I heard somebody say my name on the walkie, and I responded to them. I wasn't sure who it was, but they told me to go to the next channel, so I did. I was used to people calling me on there, and had received several calls earlier in the night. When you got a call on the walkie, usually it was anything from taking your break to being needed in another section of the store. As I was flipping to the next channel, I was wondering who it was that was calling me. After changing channels, I announced that I was there. At first, I heard nothing at all. Then, after a few seconds, I heard this creepy-sounding laugh. It went on, and I spoke again, asking who it was that was talking to me. They didn't answer, though, and just kept laughing. Once more, I asked who it was, but was starting to suspect that it was a joke. Then they stopped laughing and said my name. It was a man speaking in a very deep voice, like he was trying to disguise it. He said that he was waiting for me in the parking lot. I laughed a little, assuming that it was somebody just messing around. After all, most of us were just about done for the night. I still couldn't figure out who it was, though. kept working, and pretty soon was done and could clock out. I went into the employee-only area, got my things, and then left the store. Now, the parking lot was very quiet. Most of the cars belonged to employees and were parked towards the middle. Then there was my car, parked near the way back corner. It had been very busy when I arrived. So when I was walking out to my car and about halfway there, I noticed one other car parked near mine. It was a few rows over and to the left, at least 100 feet away, but the engine was running. When I reached my vehicle and was just a few feet from it, I noticed the car starting to drive. I really wasn't thinking anything of it until it began heading in my direction. And not only that, but it started going really fast. I didn't recognize the car as belonging to anybody that I knew. It quickly drove closer and I got inside of my car and locked the door. Then the car parked in the space next to mine, but going in the opposite direction. I looked over, but the window was really tinted and I couldn't really see in. It was at that moment that I remembered what the person had said to me on the walkie. Was that not a joke? I sort of had a bad feeling about this. Still, I figured that I would just drive home, and I hoped that whoever this was would not follow me. As soon as I started to pull away though, the car started driving and turned around. I then realized that's exactly what was going on. I turned and started heading back towards Target. I didn't want to drive home being followed. I drove back towards the front middle of the parking lot and closer to the store. This was where most of the other cars were parked and scattered around. I parked in between two other cars that were parked already. The car that was following me drove closer, but then parked across and a little ways back. Now it was maybe 50 feet away from me. Then I got out of my car and walked extremely fast for the entrance of Target. I looked back briefly and saw that the car was still running, but nobody got out. That made me feel a little bit better. After I made it inside Target, I saw one of my coworkers who I knew walking by, and I told him about what happened. We both decided to look and see if the car was still there. After making it to the entrance doors, we looked out and I pointed to the car. We watched it, and then something surprising happened. It pulled out of the parking space that it had backed into. Then it slowly drove up the aisle and out of sight. The car had finally left. I then left Target once more and headed for my vehicle. I walked quickly and made it inside. Then I started the engine and backed out. But after I backed out, I was going to drive down the normal way that I usually left. But it was then that I saw a car in the far distance coming from the corner of the parking lot opposite to me. It was headed in my direction, and I was pretty sure that it was the same car. I scrambled to turn my car to face the other direction. The car was still really far away from me, but it was getting closer. Then I quickly drove out of the lesser-used back exit of Target. This road led to another quieter road that went behind another store that was nearby. I think that it was a sporting goods store, and after I went on the road, I went into the parking lot. From there, I drove all the way around the sporting goods store and parked on the side of it. I knew that the car following me would have no way of knowing that I was there. It probably assumed that I just tried to get back on the highway. I waited there, just hoping that I would not see headlights coming around the corner. Several minutes went by, and thankfully, I didn't. Then I was finally able to leave and go home. After that experience, nothing like that happened while working at Target. I don't know who it was that was talking to me that night on the walkie. It was very possible to get on our frequency, even if you were in the parking lot. I just don't know who would do it, or why. Back when I was in high school, during my freshman and sophomore years, I would ride the bus. It picked me up at the corner of my street early in the morning and would drop me off afterwards. I went to an average-sized high school about 10 minutes away from where I lived. At least, the place seemed average to me. There was probably about 700 or 800 kids, combined in all 4 grades. This is something that happened during my sophomore year. It was a school day, just like any other to that point. One class had just ended, and I was going to my final class for the day. As I stood in the hallway near my locker, I talked with some of my friends. I had a decent friend group of several other guys. The locker commons were always really crowded in between classes, and I remembered that the first warning bell rang. That meant that you had 2 minutes to make it to class. Kids started leaving the commons, but me and a couple of friends stayed. My classroom wasn't really that far off. I remember that one of the guys there was a grade ahead of us, and his name was Jake. His brother was Tommy, and Tommy was in my friend group, so I think that's why he was there. As I was about to head to class, I heard another sound come over the school speakers. At first, I was thinking, how could the bell ring again so soon? But it wasn't really the same bell sound for when class starts. It was followed by an announcement over the intercom. We were told that the school was going into a lockdown. All of us should go to our next hour classes immediately, and the teachers should lock the doors and turn off the lights. There was still kind of a lot of kids around, including the 4 of my friends. I heard one of them say they were going to just leave. Nobody wanted to sit in a classroom for who knows how long during a lockdown. One of the school exit doors was not that far away. There were already some kids leaving. I saw about 10 kids running for the doors and going outside, and more followed. There was only one class period left for the day, so I decided that I wanted to leave as well, but I didn't drive there. That's when Jake asked me if I wanted to leave. He said that he would give a ride home to anybody that wanted to because he was leaving. As he said this, he started to walk away. Half of my friend group was leaving, and the other half were actually going to their classes. Other kids were also leaving, and it became chaos. We had to leave fast if we were going to. I saw one of the teachers enter the hallway and start to tell kids to get to their classes. There were less and less kids around by the second. I decided to leave, but by that point, Jake and my other friends had already left. I remember the teacher yelling at the kids to stop leaving. There were probably like 50 that ended up making it out of the school. I was one of them, and when I got outside, my friends and I did not do a good job sticking together. Kids were literally running away to leave. They were going to the parking lots where students parked mostly, and some ran off through the grass towards a nearby neighborhood. The school was in an area that was mostly residential, but there were a few businesses down the road. There was a woods and all of the sports fields behind the school. The student parking lots were on the side, and then one was behind the tennis courts. When I got outside, I couldn't even see Jake or my friends anymore. It was basically chaos. Kids were running everywhere. A teacher took a step out of the school and told us all to come back inside, but nobody listened to him. I figured that Jake and my friends would be in the parking lot, so I ran in that direction. I had to kind of go around the school to get there, though. I wasn't sure which parking lot Jake parked in, so I went to the main one first. When I got there, he was nowhere in sight. I realized that it must be the other one, and I hoped that I wasn't too late. By now, most kids had made it to their cars if they were leaving. I sprinted for the other parking lot, but it was a ways away. When I got there, there was nobody. A lot of cars were still there, but I didn't see any students at all. I walked around, hoping that maybe my friends were in their car but hadn't left yet. Unfortunately, though, I didn't see them. I realized that they must have left without me. Now I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go back to the school because it was probably locked, and I wasn't supposed to leave in the first place. But I also couldn't go home because it was too far to walk and I didn't have a car. I started walking back up closer to the school, not really knowing exactly what I was going to do. I got to a back door of the school and tried going inside, but it was locked, just like I figured it would be. After this, I was going to go back around to the parking lot and then walk down the sidewalk. But when I turned, I saw some guy coming out of the school. I just knew that this guy had to be the reason for the lockdown. He was looking over his shoulder, was way too old to be a student, and definitely not a teacher. I was a long ways away from him, and I quickly ran behind a tree that was nearby. I was just hoping that the guy didn't see me. For a few seconds, I didn't bother to look and see where the guy was. I was expecting him to walk in another direction. But as I was still behind the tree, I heard the guy walking closer. I ran from behind the tree to the woods, which was maybe 20 feet away. There was no question that the guy saw me running into the woods. I was hoping that he wouldn't follow me. I got inside, went about 20 feet deep in it, and then ducked down and hid. I had no clue why the school had been locked down up until that point. I had been more concerned about leaving with my friends. After seeing a suspicious guy leave the school, though, I realized that I might be in actual danger. For a few seconds, I didn't hear anything, until I heard footsteps in the grass right outside of the woods that I was in. I couldn't take it any longer, and I got up and started running. I ran through the woods and then to the left. I didn't hear the guy enter the woods or anything, but I just wanted to get out of there. After like 2 or 3 minutes of running, I reached the edge of the woods, kind of near the street. I walked through the grass to the sidewalk and then ran down it. I kept going until I eventually reached a gas station. When I got there,
I asked the employee working if I could borrow his cell phone to call my mom. I told him how my school had been locked down and everything. He let me, and I was able to wait there until my mom came and picked me up. Luckily, she worked not too far away from the school and our house, and was able to leave work without a problem. I didn't get in trouble for leaving school early either. The lockdown ended up lasting for the entire class period. In fact, students were kept there almost 10 minutes after the regularly scheduled time that school got out, so I didn't miss any class or anything. The man that I saw had entered the school, trying to pick up his daughter. It was a situation where he was divorced and hadn't seen his daughter in a long time and didn't have custody of her. He was also drunk and threatened a custodian when asked to leave. I'm not sure why he came over to me when I was in the woods, though. It was a really scary situation for me.
This happened to me yesterday. I was attending a concert with my twin sister, who is 19, and my older sister, who is 24. The concert was in Los Angeles, California, at the Echoplex venue. To give some context about the location, Echoplex venue is located right by a place called Skid Row. This area is full of homeless people and drug addicts and is not in the best location. Since the concert was located in a bad area, my protective mom drove us there. She also brought a taser and pepper spray with her just in case something happened. I will later explain how this is relevant to the story. The concert was supposed to start at 7, and there were no assigned seats, just standing room only. So my sisters and I wanted to get there at least 3 hours before to wait in line so we could get the best spots to stand at. To describe the layout of the venue, the entrance of the venue was located in an alleyway. It was pretty evident that we were the first fans there. So we got there through the alley and pulled up to the entrance and asked one of the security guards where they wanted us to start the line. He told us that he wanted us to start the line on the sidewalk and pointed to the entrance of the alleyway. We made our way there, and we knew we would be waiting for a while, so we brought lawn chairs and set them up along the sidewalk. My mom, being street smart and overly protective, did not want to drop us off and leave, so she stayed in line and waited with my sisters and I. We were sitting along the small brick wall just outside of the alleyway. I turned to my left and there was a tattoo parlor with a table and chairs in the front. Half an hour passed and a handful of fans arrived to wait in line as well. Now remember, we're in California and the weather gets warm. We knew that smaller concert venues can get packed and create a lot of body heat, so my sisters and I were wearing jean shorts. This is also relevant to the story. After waiting a while, I looked towards my left where the tables were in front of the tattoo parlor. I noticed a short, heavy man wearing a hat, staring right where me and my sisters were sitting. It creeped me out a little bit, but I decided to try to ignore it. About 20 minutes later, a skinny man with black curly hair sat right next to the short guy with the hat. I noticed that the skinny man with curly hair was under the influence of drugs. The two men did not say anything to each other, but looked like they could be related. This made me more aware, and I turned to my sisters and warned them, saying, "Be careful with these two guys at the table. They seem suspicious." I tried looking forward to the concert, but I was terrified as I noticed that now the skinny man was starting to look at me from the table. He began to walk past the entrance of the alleyway and right past us a couple of times, and every time he passed by, I held my breath out of fear. Even the short guy with the hat would get up from his seat occasionally and stand right by us and was talking with someone on the phone. It became so evident that they both had their eye on us that we kept a close eye and remained cautious. We had 1 more hour before the doors of the venue opened when the skinny man walked right past us. He stopped and stood in front of my older sister. After he was done staring at her, he then moved on to me. He stood right in front of me and began rubbing his stomach and making the noise as if he was eating and was directly staring at my legs. I was disgusted and felt violated. It was like he was eating me with his eyes, and I wanted to scream at him and cuss him out. But remember, my chair was against the wall, so I couldn't back up. I did not freeze out of fear, but my mind was racing. I was trying to think of what to do. Do I kick him? Do I get up? I know that people who are under the influence can be reactive to sudden movements, so I decided to stay still. It was like a scene from Jurassic Park, and I had to stay still so the T-Rex wouldn't attack me. My mom was standing right next to me and clutching the taser, ready to zap him. She kept telling him to stop looking at her and back up. This made me feel a little more safe, but what was alarming was he was still not leaving after my mom's multiple warnings. Finally, my mom yelled for security, and he quickly left and retreated to the tables in front of the tattoo parlor. That was not that far away from where the short man was still sitting. After going to the tables, he was still staring at me with a big smile. When I told my mom that he was still staring, she looked right at him, and his eyes changed from my direction to my mom's. His expression changed from smiling to now angry, and a look of hate towards my mom because she got in his way. If you're wondering why no one in line helped us, most of the people who were in line were females who were just as scared as we were. The males in line froze, and when we told security about it, they said they couldn't do anything. That was because the line was outside of the venue, and they're required to only protect the inside of the venue. The girls behind us in line told us that as the man retreated back to the table, he noticed that my mom turned her back for a second. When she was turning her back, she joked with us how she was ready to zap him. Not even 5 minutes after the incident, the short, chubby man with the hat asked one of the employees of the venue what time the event ended. After that, he left without the skinny man. This terrified me because he didn't know anyone who was going to the concert, and he didn't have a ticket, so why would he be asking that? I told my mom that I heard the short man ask the employee, and she told me that she would be waiting right outside the venue for us, and to text her before leaving. Finally, it was time for the concert to start, and the doors were open. As my sisters and I were walking through the alley to get to the doors, my mom later told me that the skinny man and short man were smiling, watching us walk in. We finally got inside the venue, and the thought and fear of the men stayed in the back of my head for a while. But eventually, I forgot about it and was able to enjoy my time at the concert. My mom texted my sister and told her that she called my uncle, who's a correctional officer. She told him what happened earlier, and he was upset and decided to make the 1-hour drive and wait right outside the venue for us with my mom. This made us feel a lot more safe. When the concert finally ended, we began to walk out of the venue, and I saw my mom and uncle waiting right outside. When I looked past them, I saw the same car the short, chubby man was in, right in the front, now filled with a lot of men in the back seat just waiting. My mom and uncle told us to walk in the other direction from the car, and so we did. Thankfully, we made it to the car safely and drove home. I don't know what the two men's exact intentions were, but all I know is it was not good. I'm just glad that we made it out safely. This happened during one really cold night in the winter. It was well below freezing, and I lived in an apartment and drove an older car. I had had the car for a long time, and I knew that I had to start the engine a lot in the winter. If it was really cold and I didn't start the car at least once a day, sometimes the battery would die. So on this night, it was especially cold, and I had used the car earlier in the day, but it had been hours. I didn't want to take any chances, so I decided that I would run the engine for a little while before I went to bed. Now, it was probably like 11 p.m. or so at this time. I left my apartment and walked outside to the parking lot. My car was parked in front of my building, and several other cars would park there as well. There was an underground parking garage, but it costed extra money each month to park there, and I didn't feel the need to get it. So when I got outside, it was very cold and very quiet. Even though I was wearing my winter coat, a warm hat, and gloves, I was still somehow freezing. It was even kind of hard to breathe with the wind blowing cold air in my face. I got inside of my car and started up the engine. It started, but it sounded like it just barely started. I realized I had definitely made a good choice on coming out here. Usually, I think you're supposed to run your engine for like 10 minutes or so at least, but I'm honestly not sure, and it probably depends on the vehicle. So as I sat there in my car, the heat obviously wouldn't work much until the engine warmed up a little. I was freezing, and I didn't want to sit there in my car for like 10 minutes. So I had the idea to go for a little drive around the area. That way, the engine would warm up faster due to driving, and I wouldn't just be sitting there bored. So I backed out and headed out of my apartment complex. My apartment has a little walking trail behind it, and then a woods, and on the other side of the woods is a neighborhood. In front of my apartment complex is a somewhat quiet road leading to a busier one. My plan was to just drive around maybe the neighborhoods behind my apartment for like 10 minutes and then go back. So after I left, I took a right and then went down a ways and took another right. After going down that street, I was in the neighborhood over there. It was a lot of different roads with houses on them. Now, it wasn't like a super populated neighborhood. They had a little bit more space, with some woods and larger sized properties. I started driving down a few of these roads, and nobody else was out driving or anything, which was to be expected. I was mainly paying attention to the heat in my car, waiting for it to warm up. If I started to feel it warming up, that meant the engine was warming up. I remember that I was driving through an area between one neighborhood and another where there was a lot of trees. That's when I saw a man emerge from a woods area, walking through the snow. He then stepped out onto the street and stood in my lane. He was a ways up, but I started to slow down. The guy was wearing a really big coat and was dressed for the weather. He had gloves and a hat and what looked like snow pants on as well. He was just standing there in the middle of the road now. At first, I thought he was just going to cross the street, but he wasn't. It was unclear why he was standing there. It seemed pretty strange to even be out at this time and in this weather. I had to slow down all the way to a stop to wait for this guy. As I was stopped there on the road, he looked at me and kind of waved me over. The guy seemed sort of strange, and I wasn't sure what he was trying to get me to do. As I sat parked there, he began walking over to me. Then he walked to my driver's window as if he wanted to talk to me. I rolled my window down and was honestly surprised that that even worked. When the temperature got this cold, sometimes the window would be frozen shut. After my window rolled down, I thought that the man would talk to me and explain what he was doing out here or something. Instead, as soon as I rolled the window down, he started to aggressively reach inside of my car. It seemed like he was going for my keys in the ignition. As a reaction, I tried to bat his hand away. Then I stepped on the gas and went forward. The man had to take his hand out of my window, and I drove away from him with him standing on the side of the road. I figured that's enough driving around time for me, and I headed back to my place. I was extremely close to my apartment, just on the other side of it. I drove back around to the front and then entered the parking lot. Then I got back to my parking spot where I typically parked in. I turned the car off and got out. As soon as I did, I noticed the same man. He was coming out at the edge of the woods behind my apartment building. It was pretty far away, but the woods that he was coming out of was not very far at all from where I had seen him. I didn't realize that he probably could see where I was going, and I wasn't even that far away. I hurried and ran for my apartment door as I saw the man starting to walk closer to me. I made it inside and then went up to my place on the second floor. When I got up there, I went to my window and looked out into the parking lot. There, I saw the man was now standing at my vehicle outside of it. I watched him try to open the door, which was locked. I called the police and reported the incident. When I went back to the window, though, the man was gone. The police came out and talked to me and said that they would keep an eye out for the guy. Luckily, he wasn't able to break into my car or anything. I never saw him again after that. I'm not really sure what he was doing outside, but I'm really glad that I got away from him. This happened years ago, and I still think about it. During this time, I lived alone in a smaller house. I always considered my neighborhood and city to be safe. I knew a lot of my neighbors, and it was a quiet neighborhood where not that much happened. That's why this story was even more disturbing. One night, I was fast asleep. I had gone to bed at about 10 o'clock when I usually did. At 2 o'clock in the morning, though, I suddenly woke up. Before I could figure out what was going on, I realized that my doorbell was ringing. Now, at 2 o'clock in the morning, the sound of anything can be startling and creepy. I sat up and tried to think of anybody who would ring my doorbell at 2 a.m. They rang it again, and I got out of my bed and left my bedroom. I walked down the hallway into my living room and then looked out of the front window. There was a man dressed as a clown standing on my front step. His face was painted, and it was painted really well. He was wearing a clown costume also, and it wasn't some cheap one that you could get for $20. This man really went all out. I moved back away from the window so that he wouldn't notice me. Then he knocked on the front door. What did this guy want? I moved over to the end of my living room window, which was mostly covered. I was careful to be in a spot where he wouldn't be able to see me. Then I watched him. He kept standing there, just staring ahead at my front door. I watched him the entire time. Then he moved and left my front step. At first, I thought that he was finally leaving, but instead, after walking off my front step, he turned and headed down towards the side of my house. He went out of my sight and was going near my bedroom. I left where I was at the window and walked to the hallway again. Then I went inside of my bedroom. As soon as I got in, I saw the clown looking directly into my bedroom window. I jumped back and left the room in a hurry. I was really creeped out to see that he somehow seemed to know where my bedroom was. I wasn't really sure what to do. About a minute later, I decided to go back in my bedroom and check and see if he was still at the window. I carefully opened up the door and looked. He was gone. I felt better and hoped that this time he was finally gone for good. As I was standing there in my bedroom though, suddenly there was a loud banging sound from my back door. It had to be the clown. He was pounding on the door about as loud as he could. At that point, I called the police. I reported a man dressed as a clown in my backyard banging on my back door. The clown stopped pounding at my door, and I didn't look to check and see if he was gone. I went back into the living room and waited for the police to arrive. Several minutes later, I decided to look out of the windows again. I went to the back window and looked. When I did, I actually saw the clown. He was at the corner of my yard and moved out of it into my neighbor's yard. I kept watching and he went out of sight. Several minutes later, the police got there. I told them what happened and gave them a description of the guy. It would be hard to miss him. The police searched my yard, which wasn't very big, but the guy was gone. They didn't see him in any immediate neighbors' properties, so they didn't go in anybody else's yard. I was told they would drive around the area and look for the guy. In the meantime, if I saw him again, I was told to call back. The police left after that. I stayed up for a while checking windows, but the clown did not return. And after that night, he didn't come back at all. It was so random. I still wonder who he was and what he wanted. What would have possibly happened if I had answered the door? I'm really glad that I didn't. Maybe it was just some guy trying to be a prankster. I don't know, but it was still one of the creepiest things that I've ever seen. I had a really scary experience just 2 weeks ago. It all happened on a Thursday night as I got home from work. Up until that point, it had been a pretty typical day. I got up, went to the gym, came back home, got ready for work, and then headed out. I worked a later shift that day, so I wouldn't get off until 7 p.m. Work went by as usual, and then I drove the roughly 15 minutes it took to get back home. After arriving back, I parked my car in the driveway and got out. I currently live alone in a 2-bedroom house on half an acre of land. I walked up to my front door and went inside. After getting inside, my plan was to change and then make something to eat. I only had made it halfway to my bedroom though, when I heard the doorknob turning to my front door. I stopped where I was and suddenly had a bad feeling. Obviously, I wasn't expecting anybody to come over. I started to turn around and walk back. Then, whoever was there started knocking on the door. I walked back over, but was kind of suspicious. When I got within view of the front door, I carefully looked out of a window. There was a man standing there on my front step, and he was right against the door. I didn't want to answer it, but he kept knocking. Then I heard him yell something. I didn't know who this guy was. Maybe he was at the wrong house. I thought about answering the door in case that was true, but the way he was aggressively banging on the door caused me not to. I stayed there just a few feet away, hoping that he would leave. He demanded to be let inside. Then he said my name. I couldn't believe that he knew who I was. I was positive that I had never seen him before. I yelled to the other side as loud as I could that I was calling the police if he didn't leave right now. However, that didn't seem to have much of an effect. He stayed there and kept banging on my front door. I also noticed that he had parked his car right in my driveway. I got out my phone to call the police and dialed as quickly as I could. My heart was racing and I told the 911 operator the situation. My biggest fear was that the man would try to break in somehow and get in my house. At almost the end of my conversation on the phone, the man stopped and I noticed him running back to his car. Then he got in and drove away. I watched closely and made sure that his car left my street. I felt a little bit better and told the 911 operator this new information. They sent an officer out anyways, so that I could tell them what happened and stuff. After that, the guy was still gone, and after looking around a little bit and talking to me, the officer left as well. It was a little bit scary being home by myself that night, and I had a difficult time trying to go to sleep, but eventually I was able to. I woke up the next morning at about 7 a.m. At first, I had forgotten about the craziness of the night before. I made my way to the kitchen though and passed by a window. I happened to notice a car parked right out front by the driveway. It was the same car as the night before. The guy was back. I noticed that he appeared to be inside of it. I didn't hesitate and I called the police immediately. I told them that the man had returned. Then I carefully watched out the window. For a couple of minutes, the man remained inside. I watched him open up his door and leave the vehicle. He made his way up to my front door again. Then he started knocking. I couldn't believe this guy. I still didn't know who he was or what he wanted, and I didn't know how he knew who I was. He stayed at my door, knocking every so often. I went to the back of the house. After maybe 5 minutes, the police got there. When they did, the man tried running away. He wasn't able to make it that far though, and was caught by the police. When he was questioned, he didn't even reveal how he knew me or what his reasoning was. All he would say was that he just wanted to talk to me. He claimed that we were old friends, which was not true at all. I'm just glad that I noticed him that morning. I think that he followed me home from work the previous night, and I simply hadn't noticed. When I walked to my front door, he must have followed, but was a little ways back. This was one of the scariest experiences of my life, and hopefully I never see that guy again. I worked at Burger King during my senior year of high school. I think I worked there for a total of 5 months before quitting. There was one experience in particular that stands out when remembering my time there. It happened towards the end of my 5 months at work. I remember it was a weekend, and I was working a shift which started in the daytime and ended in the late afternoon. During that time, I was working behind the counter and taking orders from customers inside. In the hours that I worked that day, I interacted with so many people. For the most part, everything had seemed normal. Because it was the weekend, we were pretty busy during my entire shift. After I was done, I got off and drove back home. During that time, I lived with my parents and brother, maybe 10 minutes away from the Burger King in a house. When I got back home that day, I remember that my parents and brother were gone. I wasn't sure where they went at the time, but they would occasionally go places, and I didn't mind being by myself. When I got back, it was probably like 6 or 7 p.m. I made some food and then went into the living room. I was home for probably an hour and still by myself when there was a knock at the front door. It seemed a little bit odd because it was dark out by now. The sun had just set. Not knowing who it was, I got up and walked over to the door. I looked outside and saw that a man was standing there. He was about average height and just wearing a t-shirt, shorts, and appeared to be in his 40s. I didn't think he was a neighbor, but I thought that maybe that was possible. I was curious and decided to answer. After opening up the door, the guy said hi to me. He looked a little bit familiar for some reason after I got a closer view of his face. The guy asked me if I remembered him from earlier. I tried to think if I did, but I couldn't place exactly where I had seen him. I asked him from what. The man said that he was disappointed I forgot. He then told me that he was at Burger King earlier today. He said that I took his order, and when he said that, I did kind of remember him. It's just that I dealt with so many customers, it was all kind of a blur sometimes. Still, what exactly was this guy doing here at my house? After standing there awkwardly for a few seconds, I just asked him that. The man told me that he thought I seemed really cool and wanted to hang out. He pointed over to his car. A sedan was parked on the side of the road a little ways back. The guy said that we could go right now. Now, keep in mind, I was a senior in high school at the time, and this guy was like 20 years older than me at least, so this was really weird. I was shocked at what he was saying, and I said no thanks to him. He urged me to change my mind, and I started to close the door. Finally, he said, "All right then," in a disappointed tone, and then started walking off. I was relieved to see him go. After closing and locking the door, I started to realize just how odd of a situation that was. Not only was a random guy much older than me trying to get me to go in his car with him, But he showed up at my house. How would this man know where I lived anyways? He would have had to follow me home. I became really creeped out by this and felt lucky that he didn't try to force his way in or anything. I went over and looked back out the window to see if the guy had left. He didn't. The man's car was still parked on the side of the road in the same spot, and he was in the driver's seat. I watched him for like 2 minutes straight, and he didn't drive away. I was starting to get concerned about this. His car was not parked directly in front of our house, but a little ways down. It was kind of between the side of our yard and our next door neighbors. I did my best to ignore it and was telling myself that he would probably drive away soon, but I couldn't help but worry that he might get out of his car and knock on the door again or something. About an hour went by. I was still home by myself, and I went to the window to check. I couldn't believe it, but he was still there. I could also see that he was still inside of his car. I didn't know what to do, and thought that he would have been gone for sure. But just about a minute later, I heard my parents pulling into the driveway. I was glad that they were home. When they made it inside, I told them about the guy. My dad ended up going outside to confront him, but before he could make it even close to the guy's car, the man drove away. After that night, I never saw him again. I only worked at Burger King for a few more weeks after that. I went to a fairly small university for college and was there for 4 years. During my 3rd year there, I had one scary experience. It was a normal school day, and I drove from my small apartment to campus. I only lived like a mile away, and the campus was nice, but a little small. There were several different buildings that classes were in, and after parking in a parking lot, I walked to the building where mine was. When I got inside, I went to the classroom. Now, this was not a big lecture hall, but more similar to almost a high school classroom. There were about 30 students in the class, and then the professor. I remember that class started as usual. The professor was giving a lecture, and we were all sitting there and taking notes. About 15 minutes in, maybe, I heard a voice come over the speakers in the classroom. There was an announcement that the entire campus was going into a lockdown, and this was not a drill. They did not say the reason why, but said for students to remain in the buildings that they were currently in. Our professor looked and saw that she had received a text about the situation and started following the procedures. However, she was not told the reason for the lockdown at that time. It was similar to a high school lockdown drill. That was my only experience with lockdowns to that point. I had never been involved in a real one before. I was a little bit nervous, but felt safe in the classroom that we were in. The professor turned out all of the lights, locked the doors, and closed the blinds to the one window that the room had. She then told us to remain in our seats and stay calm. We were all wondering what the lockdown was for, and everybody started going on their phones to look it up. However, nobody could find any information other than that we were in a lockdown. Our college was not tiny, but a little bit smaller, so a lockdown would not necessarily make news coverage. We sat there in our desks, just waiting and wondering for a while. Mostly, we just went on our phones and did whatever. Occasionally, there were small conversations, but things were mostly pretty quiet. After almost an hour, the lockdown was lifted. The professor was informed and we were let out of class. After that, it was announced that classes had been canceled for the rest of the day. It was nice to have class canceled, but I was still concerned. We were told that they did not believe we were in any immediate danger, but I still wanted to know the reason why. I ended up just going home and back to my apartment. I talked with several friends over text, and there was a rumor that one of the professors was attacked or something. I didn't know if it was just a rumor or speculation, but we were never given an official reason for the lockdown. Later that night, we all got an email that classes for the next day were canceled as well. I was able to stay home and get ahead of things with homework and stuff. Finally, the next day after that, classes and everything resumed as normal. I went to my first class of the day, and it went by just fine. Afterwards, I walked across campus to another building for my next class. I was a little bit early and stopped to use the restroom down the hallway. Just seconds after I entered the bathroom, I was literally in a stall when I heard that the school was going into a lockdown again. I couldn't believe it. At first, I was very confused. How could we be having another lockdown again? I didn't even know for sure why we had the first one. As I was still in there, in one of the women's restroom stalls, I heard the door to the bathrooms open.
Whoever walked in there started immediately talking under their breath. I couldn't really make out what they were saying, but I could tell that it was a man, which was really weird. This was the women's restroom. I lifted up my feet so the guy wouldn't see me, whoever he was. It sounded like he was walking around towards the front of the bathroom near the door and just talking to himself. After a few seconds of that, he kind of stopped and then seemed to stand by the door for a while. Then the door opened again and the guy left. I felt relieved and then checked my phone to see if there was any information on the lockdown. I couldn't find anything, so I walked out to leave the bathroom. I didn't really know what was going on out there, but I didn't want to stay in the bathroom anymore, especially after a guy had walked in it. As soon as I left, though, I saw several police officers in the hallway. They seemed to be walking down the hall to the left, past where I was. When they saw me, they said that I should go back into the bathroom, so I did. I waited just inside and didn't know what on earth was happening. I stayed in the bathroom for almost 20 minutes until it was okay to come out, and then the lockdown ended. Once again, classes were canceled for the rest of the day. I found out all of the details afterwards. A man had in fact attempted to attack one of the professors the day of the first lockdown. He fled the building and was actually able to get away. A few days later, he came back and went after the professor again. This time, he was seen by a campus security guard, and he ran away again immediately. He was later found in a hallway, not far from the bathroom that I was in. I'm pretty sure he was the person who had been in the bathroom with me. It creeps me out to think about it.
This was something that happened several years ago now. I was in college, going into my junior year. Up until that point, I lived in the dorms, which was required for underclassmen in my university. For my junior year, I was moving into an off-campus house. I was very excited and would be living with 3 other girls who I was good friends with. The house was a lot of space. It had 4 bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs, and a kitchen, living room, and bathroom on the main floor. It also had a basement. None of us really had any furniture, so I went on Facebook Marketplace to find some. I knew that you could usually get free furniture on there, or furniture for really cheap. I didn't care if it was used or not the best quality, because we would likely only be using it for 2 years. After looking around on Facebook Marketplace for a while, I found some good options. One that I really liked was a couch that was free and just on the other side of town. The ad said that it was like new and free because the owner had gotten a new couch. The pictures were good quality and there appeared to be nothing wrong with it at all. Now, this was early in the summer, right after we got the house, and it had no furniture in it at all. I was the only one of the roommates who was there at the time, and I decided that I would get this couch for free for us. The location where the couch was just over 5 minutes away. I asked the owner if it was available, and a man named Ryan responded and said that it was. Based on his profile picture, he appeared to be in his 40s or 50s and looked like an average guy for the most part. I arranged to come and pick it up that night at 7 p.m. I got lucky and was able to borrow a pickup truck from a friend at college so that I could get the couch. It never would have fit inside of my car. So when the time came, I drove to the address. When I got there, it seemed to be in a pretty average neighborhood for being near a college campus. The houses were all old-looking and fairly small. I told the owner that I was there through Facebook and then walked up to the front door and rang the doorbell. Ryan answered the door quickly. He was tall and skinny and looked just like his picture. He was friendly and invited me inside. But after getting inside, things quickly turned sketchy. When I got inside of Ryan's house and took a few steps in, he quickly went behind me and stood right in front of the front door. I also didn't see the couch anywhere. As Ryan stood there, I expected him to tell me where it was or something, but instead, he started making small talk. He asked me if I went to the college and what my major was and stuff. At first, it just seemed friendly, but then he asked me where I lived, if I lived alone, and if I was single. Things like that, and after several minutes of this conversation, I brought up the couch. I thought he was being kind of weird. I asked him where it was, and he told me that it was just down in his basement. This disappointed me. The pictures online did not appear as though they were taken in the basement. I specifically remembered seeing natural sunlight, and it looked like it was in the living room, not an underground basement. And if he knew he was getting rid of it, why wouldn't he bring it upstairs? Ryan then said that he would have brought the couch upstairs, but he couldn't lift it by himself. I guess that made sense, as he was a pretty skinny dude. But the couch was not one of those huge ones. It was sort of on the smaller side for couches. He stayed standing right in front of the front door, almost like he was blocking it. He then pointed to the basement door, which was maybe 10 feet from where he was standing. I walked over to it, and then he said, "You can lead the way." I opened up the basement door and looked down the stairs. Suddenly, my sketchy feeling from him that I had got a lot worse. From where I was standing at the top of the stairs, the basement looked really dark and unfinished. The stairs were very old-looking, and the floors were just concrete. I saw a light switch and turned it on, but nothing happened. Ryan now moved and was standing right behind me. He said, "Oh yeah, the light bulb's burnt out." I really didn't want to go down there. I quickly thought of a reason to get out of there and away from him. Ryan said, "Go ahead," after I had been just standing at the top of the stairs for a few seconds. I then said to him, "Actually, I really have to use the restroom." I turned around and said that I had better go. Ryan didn't move and told me that there was a bathroom I could use in the basement. I said that I would much rather use one upstairs. Then he told me that he had another one on that level that I could use. I wanted to just leave, but I panicked and said okay. He said that it was right down the hall and pointed in the direction of it. As he did this, he moved back to right in front of the front door like he had been before. I walked in the direction of the hallway as he stayed where he was. I found the bathroom and went inside of it. I was panicking and didn't know what to do. I started to call one of my friends who was on campus when I heard Ryan walking closer. It was very quiet, but I heard the floor creak a little ways away. I did not hear footsteps, but I could just tell that he was walking closer. Everything was completely silent in the house, other than the light sounds of creaking on the floor. I tried not to make any noise. It seemed as though Ryan was very slowly and quietly walking closer to me. I had locked the bathroom door, but I didn't know what he was doing. Soon, I could tell that Ryan was right outside of the bathroom door on the other side. I texted my friend as quietly as I could about what was going on. Then, I very quietly ducked down and looked on the floor. Underneath the small gap at the bottom of the door, I saw Ryan's shoes. He was standing right there on the other side. I carefully walked towards the back of the bathroom without making a sound. Then, I flushed the toilet. When I did, I heard Ryan walking away. He was moving back to the front end of the house. I pretended to run the sink. Then I turned it off and left the bathroom. Ryan was back standing by the front door, but from this hallway, I couldn't see him, and he couldn't see me. I looked to the other side of the hallway. There was what appeared to be a back door to the house that led outside. Instead of walking back to the living room where Ryan was, I went to the back door. Then I opened it and went outside. As soon as I made it out, I sprinted around the house and for the street where my car was parked. I didn't stop to look and made it inside the truck and then drove off. When I did, I looked to the house and didn't see Ryan at all. I made it back to my house safely and felt lucky to have gotten out of there. When I went back on Facebook, Ryan had blocked me and I couldn't find the listing. Looking back, I don't know what Ryan's intentions were, but he was really sketchy and creepy.
I used to work at a JCPenney department store. For those who don't know, it's mostly a clothing store, but also has things like home decor. I worked there for a year and a half, and this was back in 2018 and 2019. One night, I was working until 9 p.m. Things were busy for a while, but then got very quiet. I didn't have as much to do during the last several hours of my shift. Things were pretty quiet around the store, and there were very few customers shopping. I was just sitting behind the service desk and didn't really have much to do. I saw this one guy shopping, who seemed to have been there for a while, because I remember I had noticed him earlier. He was kind of tall and thin and was wearing a hat. He never got all that close to me, but I saw him walk down an aisle a ways away. Then, like an hour later, I saw him again. He didn't have anything in his hands or a cart. He also didn't seem to be with anybody. I wondered why he was here for so long, but it didn't seem like all that big of a deal to me. As the final hour that we were open went by and 9 o'clock approached, I saw him a couple of more times. He seemed to almost just be wandering around the store. The guy wasn't really looking at anything. As we got to closing time, the announcements were made over the store that we would be closing soon, and customers should finish up their shopping and make final purchases. When it was less than 5 minutes to close, I saw the man again. He still didn't have any items that he was going to buy or anything. Then, he kind of went out of my sight. When it was 9 o'clock, I could just go over, punch out, and leave. I did not have to do anything afterwards, like cleaning or organizing. A few other people would stay after for a bit doing that. I headed out the doors just after 9 p.m. The J.C. Penney's was located in a large shopping area. There were a couple of stores directly to the right and left of us, and there was a very large parking lot for all of them. By now, the parking lot, especially in front of our store, was almost completely empty. My car sat a long ways back, and I walked out to it by myself. It didn't take long, though, and I soon noticed the man that I had seen inside. There was a little curb with several feet of grass, which ran along the end of our parking lot, separating ours from the next business over. The man was walking in the grass along the curb. I wasn't really sure why, but I didn't really care either. I was just trying to get to my car. I will admit, though, I found it to be a little bit odd, especially after seeing him so much in the store. He was probably about 100 feet away, though. When I was still walking to my car, I heard the man suddenly start to yell something. I looked over at him, and he was waving at me. I waved to be friendly and was wondering what was going on. The man then waved at me again and called me over to him. I said that I really had to get home and then kept walking to my car. I looked away and kind of had a bad feeling, but tried to just ignore it and get to my vehicle. I heard footsteps a ways back and could tell that the guy was coming over. When I turned to look, I saw that the man was now jogging over to me. He wasn't aggressively running or anything. I didn't feel endangered by it, but I was certainly suspicious and I wanted him to stop. When he was jogging over, I got to my car and went inside. When I did, I looked up to see the man was now about 10 feet away from me. I locked my doors just to be safe. As he approached my driver's door, he was smiling and seemed sort of friendly, but he still had some bizarre behavior that made me suspicious of him. I rolled down my window slightly and the guy said hi to me. He then asked me where I was going in such a hurry. I said I was just going home. Then he made some comment about when he was jogging over, I looked nervous. I said that I was just tired from a long day of work. The guy then asked me if I wouldn't mind giving him a ride home. Obviously, I wasn't going to. I said no thanks, and then told him that there was a bus stop not far away from here. The guy then asked me if I could just give him a ride to a nearby convenience store. Once again, I said no. Finally, he said okay, and started to walk away from my vehicle. After that, I drove home. In all of my time working at J.C. Penney after that, I never saw the guy again. I still wonder, though, why that guy was acting so strange. I'm really glad that I got inside my car when I did, and that I didn't let that man inside my car.
This happened when I was a freshman in high school. During this time, I lived at home with my parents and older sister. We lived in what I would describe as a pretty average neighborhood. Our backyard was sort of big, but overall it was a very populated area. So one night, I was at home playing video games in my bedroom. My sister was in her room and my parents were out in the living room. I always liked to play video games in my room, and I had a really good setup in there. I had my gaming chair, big monitor, and a TV as well. I remember that after gaming for a long time, I got to a loading screen. I leaned back in my chair to stretch, and I casually looked to my right out of my bedroom window. The window looked out to the backyard, and at the back of the yard was a small woods. Something caught my eye when I looked out there. It looked sort of like there was a clown looking at me from just inside the woods. At first, I thought surely that wasn't the case. I kept looking and was squinting my eyes to see better. It sure looked like there was a clown there. So I got up from my chair and walked over to the window. Now that I had a better view, I could see that there was in fact a clown there, or at least somebody that was wearing a clown mask. They were standing just a couple of feet into the woods, partially blocked by trees. But the clown was looking right at our house, possibly at my window. It was extremely creepy to see this. I ran out of my bedroom and found my parents in the living room. I told them there was some guy dressed as a clown in the backyard. They followed me to my bedroom window, but when we got there, whoever this guy was now gone. I told my parents where he was and everything. We all went outside after that and looked around the backyard, although I was really creeped out. Luckily, we didn't see or hear anything when we were out there. The woods in our backyard was not that big. It only went back probably 20 feet, and then there was a fence. I was guessing whoever this guy was went through the neighbor's yard. At least he wasn't in our yard anymore. It was a real mystery as to who he was and what exactly he was doing back there. We all went back inside, and I went back to what I was doing. I looked out of my window every so often, but luckily the clown man did not return. The next couple of days were normal, no signs of the clown or anything. But it was less than a week later, and I found myself home alone. My parents were gone at friends, and my sister was at a friend's house also. I was playing video games in my bedroom, and it was probably about 9 o'clock at night. It was the same setup as the previous time. I randomly looked out of my window, which was to my right, about 15 feet away. I saw the clown guy again. This time, he was not in the woods though, but standing in the middle of the backyard, much closer. He was facing me and looking directly at my window. I got up and ran over to the window and covered it with my shades. I then ran out of my bedroom as quickly as possible. I didn't know what to do. Why would the clown guy come back? I called my parents and told them about it. They advised me to call the police if he didn't leave the yard immediately. So I looked out of another window, but I didn't see the guy anymore. I was hoping that meant that he left. I got off the phone with my parents and then looked out of several other windows. I didn't see the clown. Then I headed back to my bedroom. When I was walking in though, I heard a knock at the front door. I went over and checked out the front window and saw the clown. He was standing on the front step. I just moved away from there and ignored it. I went back into my bedroom, put my headphones on, and forced myself to just play video games. I did that until my parents got back home. When they did, the clown guy was long gone. After that night, I kept my bedroom window covered at all times. I also didn't stay home by myself for several weeks because I was too creeped out to. I'm not sure if the clown guy ever came back or not, but I didn't see him or hear from him again. This happened not that long ago. I went to the grocery store one night that was kind of near my house. It was only like 10 minutes away. I was inside the grocery store for maybe 30 minutes. Inside, things were not very busy, and it was maybe 9 p.m. When I left the grocery store, I went back to my car, which was parked at about the middle of the parking lot. There were cars scattered all around, but not too many. I noticed that there was a car parked right next to mine though that wasn't there before. I only really noticed it because there were lots of open spaces around it. The car parked next to mine was a silver-colored sedan. I didn't pay it much attention and started loading my groceries into the back of my car. But when I was just about done, I glanced over at the car that was parked next to me and noticed somebody sitting in the driver's seat. It appeared to be a man, and he was wearing a clown mask. This mask in particular was really creepy looking. It wasn't one of those cheap ones, but a really detailed one. I didn't know why he was wearing it, because it wasn't anywhere near Halloween. It just seemed kind of random and odd. He wasn't looking at me though. I put my cart back and then went to my driver's door and got inside. It was then that I looked over and noticed that the clown guy was looking right at me from inside his car. He didn't wave or move or anything, but was just staring in my direction. I smiled at him, figuring that it was some kind of a joke. Then I started my engine and drove away. As soon as my car started, he started his car as well. When I began driving, he did the same. I watched his car follow mine to the end of the parking lot, and I was worried. Immediately, it seemed like this clown guy was trying to follow me. I left the parking lot and went onto a quiet road, and then that one took me to a busier one. The clown drove behind me the whole way. The roads were pretty quiet with it being later at night. There was not a good chance that he could get stuck in traffic trying to follow me or something. If it was rush hour, that might have been a possibility. Instead, he easily stayed on my tail as I drove down the highway. After maybe 5 minutes there, I was getting worried of what I would do. I couldn't let this guy follow me all the way back home. So when I was driving, I called my boyfriend to tell him the situation. He was really confused when I told him a clown was following me on the highway. He thought I was joking at first and started laughing. I told him that I was serious and this was not a joke. Still, he didn't seem to take it as serious as I was. I told him that I was going to drive to his house. My boyfriend's house is about 5 minutes away from mine. He said that was fine with him and told me not to worry about it. I did feel a little bit better knowing he wasn't too concerned, but still, this clown guy was really creeping me out. It's one thing to dress as a clown later at night, but it's another to follow somebody home. Several minutes later, I exited the highway, followed by the clown. Then I took a quiet road for about a mile before the turnoff for my boyfriend's street. When I turned, the clown behind me did as well. The street was very quiet at this time of night. My boyfriend's house was about halfway down the street and on the right side. When I reached it, I began pulling into the driveway. It seemed as though the clown was going to do the same thing. That's when I saw the door to the house open and my boyfriend running out. He was wearing a clown mask of his own, one that he wore at a Halloween party a couple of years ago. He was holding a yellow wiffle ball bat as well and waving it around like a crazy person. The clown in the car behind me started pulling into the driveway and then stopped. My boyfriend was screaming like a madman and went running straight for the clown's car behind me. Then the clown backed out and drove away before my boyfriend could reach him. I got out of the car and asked my boyfriend if he was out of his mind. I couldn't believe what he was doing. He took his mask off and started laughing, calling the other clown a wimp for running away. We went inside after that, and I ended up being really glad that he did that. It could have been extremely dangerous though. Who knows who that guy in the clown mask was and what he wanted? Maybe that was just his way of disguising himself, and me being a young woman, he was trying to stalk me. I'm really not sure, but I'm glad that my boyfriend considered the whole thing one big joke. He told me that he thought of the idea when I told him I was going to his place. He remembered the clown mask and thought he would out-clown the clown. I'm really glad that it worked. I went to Burger King one busy afternoon about a year ago. I was going to pick up some food and bring it back home, and when I got there, I saw that the place was very busy. There was a long line, and many other people sat at tables inside. The employees seemed really busy as well, trying to keep up with the rush of people. I realized that I had probably gone at a bad time, and I got into the back of the line and waited. Things actually moved by pretty quickly though, and eventually it was my turn to order. After I placed my order, I stepped aside and waited for it to be done. There seemed to be quite a few people working there. I looked around the busy restaurant as I waited, and about 5 minutes later, I heard my order being called. I walked up to the counter, and a man was holding my bag of food. I took it and then started walking away to the exit. When I started walking, though, I remembered that I realized my shoelace had become untied. I stopped sort of by the door at an open table and set the bag of food down on it. Then I tied my shoe again. When I looked up from tying my shoe, there was a Burger King employee standing right there looking at me. I stood up and saw that he appeared to be angry. The man then said that I didn't say thank you to him. I was really confused and asked him what he was talking about. He then accused me of playing dumb. He told me that he handed me my food and I didn't even say thank you. Now, I admit that I didn't say thank you to the guy, and it was a mistake. Usually I do, but I guess I just forgot that time because things were so busy and people were everywhere. When I realized what he was talking about, I said, "Oh, my bad, you're right, I'm sorry." "Well, thank you." He was not satisfied with this. The employee told me that it was too late, and he then grabbed my food from the table. He called me a piece of garbage, and then took the food and stuffed it into a nearby trash can. I couldn't believe what he had just done. I mean, I apologized and said thank you to him, and I also paid for that food. I didn't think it was right for him to throw it away. The guy then told me to get out of his restaurant and stormed off to the employees area. He seemed to disappear in the back and out of my sight, and then I walked up to the counter. Things were still pretty busy, but another employee soon asked me what it was that I needed. I told her that a guy who worked here just took my food and tossed it in the garbage because I didn't say thank you. The employee told me that she knew who I was talking about, and she said that she thought he had anger problems. She said he often snapped at people for random reasons. I had thought maybe he was a manager, but I was told that he wasn't. I asked if my order could be remade, and as I was doing so, the man emerged from the back. He immediately locked eyes with me, and I saw his expression go to anger again. He stormed over and intervened. He told the other employee to go away and not to talk to me. Then he claimed that I was banned from the store. The other employee looked a little bit stressed, and I said that I would leave. I said, "Forget my order, I don't want to cause any problems. I'm just gonna leave. I apologize for not saying thank you, but I think you have some anger problems, man." Then I turned and started walking out of the restaurant. I probably should not have said that last part about anger problems to the guy. I saw out of the corner of my eye him walking over to me again. I sped up and made it outside of the restaurant, but he followed me out. When we were both in the parking lot, he started yelling and cursing at me. He followed me all the way to my car, and he even tried to get me to fight him, but I declined. I kept going and got inside my car. I was trying to keep my cool, but I really wanted to yell back at him. Still, I didn't. When I got in my car and was in my driver's door, I told him to leave me alone or I would call the police. The guy just flipped me off with both hands as I drove away, leaving the Burger King. After that experience, I never went back. It was interesting to hear the other employees' take on the guy. She seemed to know right away who would do something like that. That tells me that he probably did have some anger management issues. I'm just glad that he didn't actually try to fight me.
This is something that happened when I was a kid, about 13 years old. I lived with my parents and two older siblings, both sisters. I remember that my father got a new job, and we had to move like an hour away. For me, it was exciting, but also kind of sad to leave our old neighborhood, especially at that age. Our new house I thought was pretty nice. It was in a neighborhood with lots of other houses, but we had a decent-sized front and backyard. We were not rich, but it had 2 floors and a basement. All 4 of the bedrooms were upstairs, and the main floor had a kitchen, dining room, living room, and family room. There were also a couple of bathrooms and closets. We moved in one day with the help of a moving company, and then spent the next couple of days unpacking boxes and stuff. By the following week, we were all moved in, and it was summertime, so luckily I didn't have school. One night during that same week, I stayed up late playing video games. This is something that I did a lot during that time. Everybody else had gone up to bed, and I was by myself on the main floor and in the family room. I really don't remember exactly what time it was, but probably after midnight is what I would guess. As I was sitting on the floor and playing video games looking at the TV screen, I saw something behind it. We had a window which faced the side of our house behind this particular TV. I saw somebody walk past outside, right by the window. I couldn't tell who it was at all, but it really took me by surprise. At first, I was wondering if I really just saw what I thought I did. Our house wasn't that close to the neighbors on that side that it would be the neighbor. I had a bad feeling about it. It seemed as though whoever it was headed into our backyard. I decided to get up and go look out of one of the back windows inside. I carefully went towards the kitchen, which was at the back end of the house. When I did, at first, I didn't see anything. I got up close to the window and looked out into the backyard. Everything seemed normal though. It was pretty dark in the backyard, but I could see most of it. I was wondering who the person was and where they had gone, but I was also glad that I didn't see them back there. After looking out the window for probably like a minute or two, I backed away. Then I headed back into the family room where I was before playing video games. Around the time that I made it back into the room though, I heard a rattling coming from the back door. Somebody was trying to open the back door leading from the backyard to the kitchen. Instantly when I heard it, I sprinted up the stairs. Then I ran all the way to my parents' bedroom. I woke them up and told them that somebody was trying to get in the house. My parents both came downstairs with me. When my dad turned on the light to the backyard, he saw the man running away. I didn't go over there, but I guess the man was by the house near the other back window and no longer at the back door. He ran out of the yard and through another neighbor's backyard before going out of sight. After the guy ran away, my parents stayed up for a bit, but the guy didn't come back. My dad went outside and saw some marks on the back door. I think the man was trying to get in. I went to bed a short time later and the guy never returned. For the rest of the time that we lived there, no more strange things like that happened either. I still wonder who the guy was and why he tried entering our house. For months, I was afraid that somebody else would try to break in. Luckily, nobody did though.
This story takes place years ago when I was in high school. It happened after lunch period. The way my school worked is that we would have class, then lunch, then study hall. Class was an hour long, and lunch and study hall were about 25 minutes each. Your study hall classroom would be the same classroom that you had directly before lunch. But for me, I had gym class that period. It was 10th grade PE. The class was very easy and enjoyable for me. When we would have study hall, though, we would have to use a different teacher's classroom who had prep hour at that time. But a couple of times, we were unable to get the classroom and then had to spend study hall in the gym, which was kind of weird. If that happened, we would sit in the bleachers or on the gym floor and do homework. Usually, the teacher would let us know before we went to lunch where it would be, and most of the time, we had a certain classroom. So on this school day, after lunch, I started heading back to the classroom. It was a decent ways away from the lunchroom on the other side of the school. I talked with some of my friends that I sat with at lunch for a while. My gym teacher was not very strict at all, especially with study hall. He didn't mind students coming back a minute or two late. The lunchroom cleared out, and I began walking back to class. The bell rang when I was still like a minute away. By then, the hallways were empty, besides me walking them. Soon, I got to the classroom. The door was closed, which was odd, and when I tried opening it, I couldn't. The door was locked. I also noticed that inside the window, the lights appeared to be off. I turned and walked away, realizing that we must be meeting in the gym today. I hadn't known, though. I remember thinking to myself, I don't remember being told that we were meeting in the gym. How did everybody else know besides me? I headed back towards the gym, and then I heard an announcement come over the school speakers. It said, "This is a lockdown, and this is not a drill. Please remain in your classrooms, and no students are to be out in the halls." I was about halfway back to the gym at that point. It still hadn't registered to me that the classroom had been locked down. I hurried up and made my way to the gym. When I got there, the doors were closed and locked. It was in that moment that I realized they were meeting in the classroom. I know I was a little slow on that, but I headed back to the classroom, now walking as fast as I could without running. I hadn't heard or seen anybody else in the hallways at all. It was completely quiet, until suddenly, I heard the sound of something hitting a locker around the corner. It was like somebody punched a locker or threw something up against it. The sound was very loud, especially to break the dead silence. I stopped in my tracks and no longer wanted to keep going to my classroom. I started walking in the other direction. In that moment, I heard footsteps coming from where I had heard the loud noise. My heart started racing. I kept walking and heard the footsteps continue. They were about to come around the corner now. I saw a staircase on the left and darted over and quickly went down the stairs. After getting down, I ran about 30 feet down the hallway to the first classroom that I saw. When I was there, I desperately started banging on the door. I didn't know what class this was, but I was hoping that they would let me in. After knocking a couple of times, I tried the door, but of course, it was locked. The teacher was not answering. I hoped that there was actually a class going on in there currently. As I waited, I heard whoever had been behind me now walking down the stairs rather quickly. I looked back and saw their legs appearing, but couldn't tell who it was yet. I didn't want to know. I turned back and kept banging on the door. Then, I heard the person behind me reach the bottom of the stairs and start walking towards me. All of a sudden, the classroom door finally opened. The teacher let me in and quickly shut the door once I was in the classroom. All of the lights were off, but I saw the students in the class were in the back of the room and on the floor. The teacher quickly locked the door, and then somebody actually tried opening it just a few seconds later. It must have been whoever had been following me. Then they banged on the door a couple of times. The teacher looked out the little window and then turned back and walked away. Some students started talking quietly. One of them asked me where I had come from. The teacher stopped everyone and said for us to all be quiet. I remember things got really silent for a while then. She went back over to the door and looked out again. I think by then the guy was gone. We remained locked down though for what felt like a really long time. I think it was almost an hour. Finally, the lockdown was lifted. I remember that I got called to the principal's office and had to answer some questions about what happened. They didn't really tell me much about the situation though. That was definitely the scariest moment of my time in high school. I don't know what would have happened if that person caught up with me. I don't want to know either. This is a story that happened to me back when I was in college. I'm pretty sure that I was a freshman, and I know that I lived in the dorms. My college was really small.
Probably like 2,000 students went there, and the campus had about 5 buildings on it. One day, I got back from a morning class and then went back to my dorm. I had a little bit of free time until my next class and did some homework. Then I left my dorm room early to go to my final class for the day. I left my dorm and then just had to walk across a courtyard to the building that my class was in. It would only take about 5 minutes to do so. After leaving my dorm, outside it was very quiet. There were virtually no other students outside walking around at all. It wasn't that unusual though because of how small the college was. Plus, just about every class was still in session because it was still about 20 minutes before my class started. I got to the building that my class was in and tried going inside, but for some reason the door was locked. I found this really odd because this was one of the main entrances to the building. I went to another door, but that one was locked too. In fact, every possible entrance to the building was locked. I knew that our class was supposed to be in there, and I wasn't really sure what was going on. This was an excuse for me to not show up though. I was a good student, but the class was pretty boring and I didn't mind skipping it. I turned and walked back to my dorm, but as I was turning around, in the distance, I saw this one guy running. I thought it was kind of weird. He ran from behind one of the other buildings and then went behind a bush, probably about 100 feet away from me. As I started to walk back to my dorm, I saw the guy come out from the bush and then kind of start to walk in my direction. I turned back and kept walking. My plan was to go back to my dorm and take a nap. I remember getting to the door of my dorm building and opening it up. When I got inside, I was starting to walk to the hallway when I heard somebody trying to open the front door. I looked back and saw the same guy who I had seen outside running. He looked in the window right at me and waved. Then he knocked on the window a few times. The guy wanted me to let him in. At first, I was going to. I didn't know who he was. I had never seen him before. I thought maybe he lost his key to get in or something. But for some reason, as I took a step in his direction, I just got a bad feeling, like it would not be good to let him in. I ended up just turning and walking away. I felt kind of bad, but if he didn't live here, I was not supposed to let him in. And if he did live here after all, and maybe lost or forgot his key, he could just go to the offices and get another key fob or get let in. I had never seen him in the building though, so I really wasn't sure. I went upstairs to my dorm room and then fell asleep for an hour or two. As a college student, I was never getting enough sleep, so I took naps all the time. I remember going to the window of my dorm room and looking out to see several police cars around campus. Some had flashing lights, and I was wondering what was going on. I checked my student email and saw the notifications of a lockdown. They were from earlier in the day, and I realized why the building doors had been locked and we hadn't had class. In that first email, there were not many details. We were told to stay in the buildings that we were in and would be notified when the lockdown was over. We were also told that classes were canceled. I'm not sure how, but I was not aware of the lockdown up until that point. I stayed inside my dorm room, and classes were called off for the rest of the day. Just about 30 minutes later, though, the lockdown finally ended. It took a few days for me to get all of the information of what happened, or at least most of it. But a guy who did not attend the college, but lived in the area, apparently made several threats against the university. Somebody who did go to the college knew that guy and reported him. He later showed up on campus, and after seeing him, he was reported and the place got locked down. He was locked out of buildings and hid on campus for several hours. There were multiple reports of him trying to get inside buildings. He happened to be the same person that I had seen outside, and I almost let him into my dorm building. I'm really glad that I didn't.
This happened to me back when I was a kid. I remember that one time I had to go to my older sister's concert. She played some kind of instrument, I don't even remember what, but I was probably about 7 years old, and I thought that going to her concerts were so boring. I would have to go to them several times a year. One of them I went to with my parents and grandparents as well. I sat there for what felt like hours listening to various music. The concert was taking place in a local high school. It was not the high school that I ended up attending, but one that was a few cities away. I remember that after the concert was over, everybody wanted to go out into the main area outside the auditorium. I believe that it was the cafeteria of the high school, but there were only a few tables set up. There were tons of people standing around and talking. All of the kids who performed and their families and friends were gathered around. After we located my sister, we were talking to her and some of her friends. In this time, I happened to spot one of my friends from school. He had an older sister who was in the concert as well. When I saw him, I walked over to say hi. Then we started walking around the school a little bit, just talking. This only lasted for about 5 minutes, and then his parents called him over to leave. At that point, I was more towards the front of the school, but still in the same large room. I started to walk back over to where my parents and sister had been. When I got over there, I no longer saw them though. I figured that they must have moved. I started to kind of walk around and look for them. The place was extremely crowded. When I was sort of on the side of the room and still walking, this guy approached me. He asked me if I was looking for my parents. The way he spoke made me think that he either knew my parents or knew who I was, but I had no clue as to who he was. And for some reason, I thought that he either worked for the school or was involved in the concert somehow. I don't remember why, if he was wearing something that looked official or if I just assumed, but I know that I thought that he did, and I told him yes. He then said to follow him, and I began to walk after the guy. I know that we went to the end of the room towards the front, and then he took a right. At that point, we both started walking down a very long hallway. The hallway was quiet and nobody else was in there. I remember wondering why my parents went down there at first, and then my thoughts changed from wondering why my parents were there to wondering if my parents were there. I was starting to get suspicious of the guy. My parents had told me many times not to go places with strangers. When we were towards the end of the long hallway, I saw the end was an exit, and these exit doors appeared to lead out to a parking lot. I kind of slowed down and then stopped. I had a really bad feeling about it now. When I did that, the guy told me to hurry up. I still wasn't moving though. At that point, he stepped back and grabbed my hand and started to tug me in the direction. I was resisting and struggling to. I was small for my age, so I didn't have much strength compared to him. But the more he pulled on my arm, the more I tried to get away from him. I was starting to move in the wrong direction. The hallway that we were in was lined with lockers. I remember that I was right next to them as he was pulling on my arm. I just started kicking the lockers as hard as I could. I was making a really loud sound. The guy yelled at me to stop, but I didn't. He then tried to grab my other arm and almost pick me up. I was resisting and kept kicking on the lockers. I was making a super loud noise. Then someone else entered the hallway. It was probably somebody that heard the loud noises. When they did, they yelled at us asking what was going on. That's when the guy just bolted. He let go of me and then went out the side exit door. I then went running back towards the person at the end of the hallway. It was a woman who I did not know, but I went up to her and told her what had happened. She eventually helped me find my parents, and I remember she got to a phone and called the police as well. An officer came out to the school and talked to me, and they looked around for the guy, but he was long gone. And I don't know if he was ever found either. I'm just grateful for the woman, and I'm glad that I didn't get kidnapped that night.
When I was 16 years old, I got my first job working at a Walmart. It was about 10 minutes away from my parents' house, where I lived at the time. I was in high school and would work sometimes after classes were over or on weekends. During this time, I did not have a car, and my parents would drive me to and from work. I was hoping to earn enough money from my Walmart job over time to possibly buy a car. A couple of months after I started working there, I had a shift one night. I started at 4 p.m. after school and got off at 9 o'clock. I was a cashier and was at the check lanes for my entire shift. Things pretty much went by as usual. The store was not too busy, and there was really only 2 hours where there were a lot of customers. Other than that, it was fairly quiet. I actually was able to get off a little bit early that night. At about 8:45, my manager told me that I could leave now because things were so quiet. I left the check lanes and went to the employees-only area of our store to clock out. Then I texted my mom, letting her know that I was off early. She knew that I worked until 9, and sometimes I would get off a little bit early or later. My mom replied quickly, letting me know that she would be leaving to come and get me. I left the store and walked to the front of it. There were a few benches looking out to the parking lot on the sidewalk area over there. There were also a couple of small plants and trees as well, scattered around. I sat next to this tree on a bench, where I would often sit and wait for my mom to pick me up if she wasn't there already. I went on my phone and just waited. The parking lot was pretty quiet for the most part by now. It was getting to be a little bit later at night. Still, occasional customers would come inside the store or leave. There were also a lot of cars in the parking lot with all of the employees we had, as well as the customers. I remember seeing this one car, which was a larger and older looking SUV, enter the parking lot. It drove around, and then drove right in front of the entrance doors, which were a little ways to my left. Then it slowly went forward and past me, going to the other set of doors. I watched it go past those doors and take a left, going back through the parking lot. I really didn't think much of it and focused my attention back to my phone. But I remember a couple of minutes later, looking up and seeing the car again. It was back, as if it was taking another lap around the parking lot. It was also moving at a very slow speed. This time, the car came to one of the parking aisles and then turned to go towards me again. It drove along the front of the store and slowed down some more. Then it stopped, literally right in front of me. I had a sort of bad feeling about it for some reason, but I was more confused than anything. This certainly wasn't my mom's car. After the SUV stopped, the passenger side window, which was closer to me, rolled down. Now I could see that there was a man in the driver's seat and he was looking right at me. He then yelled to me, asking if I needed a ride. The man said that he could drive me home or to wherever I was going. I shook my head and told him no thanks. I didn't get a good look at the guy, but I remember that he had sort of dark and long hair and was wearing a baseball cap. He said that I should go with him and waved me over. I still said no, but the man did not drive away. I thought he would leave, but for a few moments he just sat there. Then, suddenly, his driver's door opened up and the man started walking around the car. The next thing I knew, I saw the guy emerge from behind his car and he was walking right towards me. He was moving at a fast pace, and I quickly got up from the bench. I turned and ran for the entrance of Walmart and didn't look back. I made it inside within probably 10 seconds, and then I finally looked behind me. The man had not followed me into the store. I didn't see him immediately outside either, and figured that he had gone back to his vehicle. I remained inside the store, sitting on an inside bench until my mom texted me that she was there. She arrived about 5 minutes after I had entered the Walmart and let me know that she was in the parking lot out front. I walked out and saw my mom's car and got inside of it. When I did, I felt much better. I told her about what had happened and we looked around. Then I saw the same SUV in the parking lot. This time it was parked in a space and the engine was running. We left and luckily were not followed or anything. I remember that when we got home, I called my boss and reported the incident. I'm not sure if the guy ever came back or anything. For the rest of the time that I worked there, nothing like that happened and I never saw the guy either. I had a really strange and creepy experience when I went to Target several weeks ago. I went shopping for a few items, and I go to Target all the time. After I got there, I was towards one of the far back corners of the store. It was very quiet over there, as the time was about 8:30 p.m., and there were not very many shoppers anymore. Out of nowhere, I saw a guy come around a corner from the next aisle. I realized that he was a Target employee. He had dark brown hair and was somewhat tall, maybe 6 feet. He walked up to me and said hi. Then he asked me if I needed help finding anything. I said no thanks, I know where everything I'm getting is, but I appreciate the help. He then offered to show me some items that were on sale, which I also declined. He said okay, and then just kind of walked off. Now, nothing was strange about that interaction, but then I continued my shopping and took maybe 15 more minutes inside the store. Then I headed to the checkouts, paid for my things, and left. I was parked towards one side of the store and about halfway back in the parking lot. I walked out to my car and then began unloading all of my things into the trunk of my car. When I was doing this, again, out of almost nowhere, I heard somebody approaching me from behind. I turned around to see the same guy who spoke to me inside of Target, but he was not wearing his Target employee uniform. Now he was just wearing sweatpants and a black jacket with the hood up. I still instantly recognized him and was very confused. The man asked me if I could give him a ride. He was like, "Hi, I was wondering if you could please give me a ride." I told him that I would not be able to do that. The guy seemed really sketchy, and that's not even because of the fact that he had just been working at Target like 15 minutes ago. After I said no, he was still standing there, and I could tell that he was going to ask me again. I said, "Don't you work here?" I was thinking maybe it would be better for him to ask a coworker for a ride or something. He said no, he didn't work there. I told him that he had just talked to me in the store a little bit earlier, but he completely denied it. Now, I know for a fact 100% that it was him. Now he was only seeming more sketchy to me. Then he told me that he didn't need a ride very far, just a little ways. I told him once again that I couldn't do it. Then I firmly turned and walked away from him and for my car. I got inside and then closed and locked the door. The man started to walk over to my driver's side door. Luckily, nobody was parked directly in front of me and I could pull right out. I drove off, leaving him standing there. After leaving, I wondered what his deal was. Why was he pretending to work at Target and then asking me for a ride? I really have no idea, but the whole thing still seems pretty sketchy to me. I'm glad that I got away from him.
My wife and I have a pet dog named Jeter, and she's been asking me to build a doghouse for a long time. My wife's been asking, not Jeter, although I'm sure he would too. I have built a few small projects over the years and bragged about them, so my wife thought it would be a great idea. I'm really not that good of a carpenter or anything, but I do enjoy building things if it's easy. After putting it off for a while, I had a weekend with nothing going on, and on Saturday morning, bright and early, I went to the Home Depot to get some supplies. I had some tools and other things in my garage, but I knew that I would need some wood, nails, and possibly a couple of other items. The Home Depot near me opens really early, I think at like 6 a.m. I got there probably a little bit after 8. Things were relatively quiet, and the first thing I did was walk over to where they sold pieces of wood. As I walked, I looked at my phone to remember what sizes I needed to buy. I arrived at the aisle and then looked up from my phone. I saw that the aisle was mostly empty, but at the far end stood a man who was facing the wall. It was really weird, like he was trying to hide his face or something. He was standing right up against it. I had to walk closer to him, and when I made it within maybe 30 feet of the guy, suddenly he moved. He turned around and grabbed a piece of wood in the process. It looked like a 2x4 and was about 8 feet long. He then kind of swung it around like it was a sword. I stopped where I was, not close enough for him to hit me or anything. I said to the man, "Careful with that thing." He froze and pointed it at me. The man was fairly short, had a beard and short dark hair. He then swung it around again, back and forth. I kind of got the feeling that this guy wasn't messing around. He then spun around, making an almost ninja-like move. It wasn't the most impressive or coordinated, but he did it nevertheless. Then he started walking close to me, while pointing the piece of wood in my direction. I was starting to think that this guy was crazy or something and wanted to fight me. There was a random other 2x4 that was on the floor, kind of near where I was. I had no intention of fighting the guy, but as he got closer, I picked it up. When he got within about 10 feet from me, I said to him, "You don't want to do this." He did though. He swung his piece of wood at me, and I raised mine so that it blocked his. When it hit my piece of wood, he dropped his piece and I dropped mine as well. They both went to the floor, and luckily, it didn't come that close to hitting me, but if I hadn't defended myself and blocked his with mine, he might have. I turned and sprinted out of the aisle. The man did not chase after me. He stayed there, apparently defending his wooden kingdom. I slowed down and walked through the store until I found a Home Depot employee. I was a ways away from the guy now, but I found somebody and I let them know about the man. They said that they would take care of it, and I decided to look for the other things that I needed in the meantime. I walked over to buy some nails and other things. I spent quite a bit of time actually looking for the other things that I needed. Probably like 20 or 30 minutes later, I started to go back over to the wood. When I was almost there though, I saw several police officers walking through the store. They seemed to be in a hurry and were headed towards the wood department. I decided not to walk over there and to just check out. I could get the wood someplace else. So I went to the front and paid for the things that I got. When I was doing so, several more police officers entered the store. I left to see about 5 police cars parked out front, no doubt because of the man. I later found out that he was caught and luckily didn't hurt anybody. He was threatening multiple people with pieces of wood though. I ended up buying wood at Lowe's instead, which is another home improvement store. I built the doghouse over the weekend and Jeter loves it, and now I have a crazy story to tell people as well. I love movies and watch them all the time. Many times I go to movies in theaters. In fact, I go so much that I often go by myself. When friends can go with me, I go with them, but I see movies in theaters at least 2 times a week, I would say. I enjoy going alone, and usually I like to sit by myself in one of the far back rows. The story I'm about to tell you happened not that long ago. I went to my local movie theater to see the Ant-Man movie. When I got inside the theater, it was sort of busy, but not too bad. The room Ant-Man was showing in was not very crowded, and I sat in the right before last row from the back. In fact, after sitting down, I only noticed a few other people inside. I watched the previews, and then the movie started. About an hour into the film, I had a weird feeling. I kind of felt like I was being watched or something. It was very strange, because I was unaware of anybody else sitting in the back row, the only row that was behind me, and the other people scattered around the theater were all in front of me and certainly not even looking in my direction. I looked behind me to reassure myself that nobody was there, but when I did, I realized that I was wrong. There was in fact a person there, and it was a man who I hadn't noticed before. He was directly behind me and not even in his seat. He was on the ground in front of his seat, sitting on the floor and looking right at me. I was very confused. I didn't know why he was sitting down in the aisle and looking at me. My first reaction was to look away, back to the screen. I figured that the man would realize whatever he was doing was weird, and that I saw him, and then he would stop. I looked back, and the guy was still there. I asked him what he was doing. The guy just looked away and ignored me. I shook my head, and then looked back to the screen, but I could tell that the guy was still sitting right behind me. I got up and moved to the far other end of the aisle and sat down there. I didn't really care exactly where I sat, I just wanted to be left alone and not have this guy breathing down my neck. I looked over to the guy a couple of times. He was still sitting on the floor, but watching the movie. I couldn't even begin to guess what his deal was, but about another 10 minutes went by, and then I heard a little movement behind me. I looked over, and the guy was in a seat that was closer to me. He was in the last row behind me and like 3 seats down, much closer than before. I rolled my eyes. Then, maybe 5 minutes later, I felt him get right behind me again as he did before. At that point, I turned around, stood up, and asked him what he was doing. The guy moved back and sat down in the seat, and then he said he was just trying to watch the movie. I was so annoyed that I just got up and left. I walked directly out of the theater, even though the movie wasn't over yet. The guy had ruined the experience for me. Sure, I could have stayed and argued with him, or I could have complained to an employee, but I didn't feel like doing those things. It wasn't that big of a deal to me, because I knew I would be in the theater again soon. I went to so many movies, and that was the first time that I had a really bad experience. I figured that it was just a freak thing and wouldn't happen again. The next couple of times that I went to a movie there, it went well. I didn't see the guy, and I saw a couple of different films. Then I was back in the theater again, probably about 2 weeks after the incident. I was expecting it to be another very typical and good night at the movies. I was by myself and seeing a movie called Operation Fortune. There were kind of a lot of people at this movie, and I once again sat in the back. This time, though, I was sitting in the very last row of seats. Some other people were in that row, but on the other side. I remember that when the movie ended, I saw some of the other people start to stand up and leave. I was about to do so as well, when I saw the man who had been behind me before. He was standing by the exit, and I was not going to leave until he did. I didn't want to run into him again. I stayed where I was and waited for him, and a bunch of other people left. However, a few minutes went by, and most of the people were gone from the theater, but the guy remained there, just kind of standing by the exit. I realized that possibly he knew that I was here, and he was waiting for me. At first, this seemed like a crazy thought, but as more time went by and the guy stayed there, it seemed like more and more of a possibility. I hadn't noticed him before though, and didn't know how he would know that I was in here. Soon, it was just me and him in the theater. I got up and started to walk over, but then stopped. I had a really bad feeling about it and thought better of it. After a few seconds, the guy started walking up the stairs in the aisle, getting closer to me. I started moving away to the other end of the aisle. Soon, the guy made it up the stairs to the back row where I was. I jumped over some seats and ran to the other aisle of stairs going down. I ran down them as fast as I could and saw the guy was running after me. When I got back down, finally, I ran to the exit and out the door. When I was back in the hallway, I ran for the nearest exit and left the theater. By that time, I made it outside, and the man was no longer following me. I'm not sure exactly at what point he stopped, but I still went home quickly. Since that experience, I haven't been back there. It's been months, and I'm thinking about going back to that theater. I've been to a couple of others, but they're farther away. I'm not sure who the guy is, or if he had seen me at the theater before and that's why he was messing with me. Hopefully, I just don't see him again. This happened when I was driving home from work about a year ago. It was very late at night, and I was driving on a quiet road. It usually took me about 20 minutes to arrive back, and this drive was going just like any other. After I exit the highway, I drive on a quieter road for about 5 miles. This road has mostly wildlife on both sides. When I was driving on this road, I saw blue and red flashing lights up ahead. I assumed that the police had pulled somebody over or something. The closer I got, the more I could see. Soon, I realized that there was somebody also standing on the side of the road. This person was wearing a safety vest and looked sort of like a police officer. I slowed down and soon made it even closer. The car with flashing lights did not appear to be a police vehicle though. It seemed like a regular car, but just had the flashing lights on it. The man standing in the road started walking across as I got closer, and I slowed down even more. He then motioned for me to stop, so I did. I was very curious as to what this was. This particular area was very rural, and there was just kind of woods on both sides of the road at this point. After stopping, I rolled down my window to talk to the guy. He had dark hair, was wearing a black cap and a black jacket with the vest. He also had a flashlight and shined it at me, which was super bright. He said hi and then told me his name, but I forgot what it was. The man spoke kind of fast and told me that they were just conducting some searches around here. Apparently, it was going on in other nearby roads. I wasn't really sure what he meant, and I asked him why. He said because there had been some criminal activity in the area. I asked him if he was the police, and he told me no, he was not the police, but he said he was working with the police department. Then the man asked me if he had consent to search the back of my car, and told me to unlock the back doors and trunk. He started moving back, and was about to grab my back door handle. I said no, and then slammed my foot on the gas, driving away from him. I heard him telling me to wait as I left him standing there in the middle of the road. I knew the guy was clearly running some kind of a scam. Who knows what he was going to do if I unlocked the car for him? He didn't give me any real details, but just skimmed over everything. I immediately dialed 911 and reported him to the police. I was told that an officer would go to the location and check it out. After that, I finished my drive home. I made it back, and I really hoped that nobody else stopped for the guy. I'm not sure exactly what his plan was. To say there was illegal activity in the area was so broad. Unless he was talking about himself, it seemed like a terrible lie to get me to open my doors. Since then, nothing like that has happened, and I really hope that the police found the guy. This took place a few years back. During that time, I moved into a new apartment. It had 1 bedroom, 2 bathrooms, and was a lot nicer and larger than my previous one. Shortly after I moved in, I met one of my neighbors as I was going into the elevator. He told me that his name was Steve, and he seemed pretty nice. I remember that we talked briefly, and he said that he lived at the end of my hallway. At the end of our conversation, I remember Steve saying that we should hang out sometime. I was glad that I seemed to make a new friend so quickly after moving in. I wasn't really sure if I would hang out with him or not though. That day, I went off to work and then got back at night. I went straight up to my apartment and then went inside. Things were really quiet now that it was late, and I was hanging out sort of in the kitchen area. That's when I heard the sound of somebody walking down the hallway. The only reason I really heard it is because I was sort of by the door and my apartment was so quiet. For some reason, I was feeling curious, so I walked over to the door and looked out of the peephole. I just wanted to see who was walking by. When I looked out though, I saw Steve. He was standing there in the middle of my hallway and looking at my door. It was really strange to see this. After a few seconds, he started walking, and I thought he was going to walk away. I figured that he was just passing by and going to his apartment, but I didn't know why he would stop. After he took a few steps, he turned and then walked back closer to my door. He got right up to it, and I almost backed away, but I didn't. He was looking at my door, super close. I was sure for a second that he was going to knock on the door or something, but he didn't. He was just there, right outside of my door. Then he backed up a bit and stood at the other side of the hallway. He was still looking at my door, though. He kind of started walking back and forth, almost pacing around. I was kind of shocked at what I was seeing and didn't know what to think, but to be honest, it was really creeping me out. I didn't think he knew that I was at the door or anything. I decided to back away because I didn't want to keep looking. It was freaking me out too much. I tiptoed away from the door as quietly as possible. Then I went into my bedroom and quietly turned on the TV to distract myself. I couldn't take my mind off of it though. Still, there were no knocks on the door and he never tried opening it either. About 5 minutes later, I got up and went back over to the door to see if he was still there. He was now gone. I was glad to see that, but still didn't know how to explain what happened. After that, I went to bed. The next day, I got up and was heading to work. Believe it or not, I saw Steve walking down the hallway towards the elevator again. I felt really awkward seeing him. He smiled and said hi to me in a cheerful mood. I said hi and asked how he was doing. Steve said he was good and asked me what I did last night. I told him that I worked late and then just came home and went to bed. I found it odd that he asked me that, but then I asked him what he did the previous night. Steve told me that he had been gone all night and got back really late after midnight. I knew this wasn't true. I had seen him in the hallway and that was at like 10 p.m. or so. I didn't ask him anything else though. After the strange situation, I didn't want to confront him. For some reason, I didn't feel all that safe around him anymore. After that, we both went our separate ways and I went to work. When I got home, I was a little concerned that something else like that might happen. I thought that I might want to try to avoid seeing him in the hallways or something. But the crazy thing is that I never saw Steve again after that. I kept thinking that I would run into him or something, but I didn't. After probably a few weeks, I had sort of got to know a couple of other people who lived in the building. One day, I asked one of them about Steve and if he still lived there. I was told that he didn't live here anymore, and he had been evicted several weeks back. They added that he seemed really strange to them. I didn't bother to tell them about my experience with Steve, but I found that interesting. I'm not sure why he was evicted, if he just didn't pay his rent or something else. Either way, I'm glad that he moved out. That was a very strange situation, and luckily, I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Back in high school, my junior year, I used to get to school about 15 minutes before it started. That's what time the bus would drop us off, and after getting inside, I would head upstairs to my locker first. Then there was this spot upstairs near the stairs that had a large window at the end of the hall. It wasn't that far from my locker either, and you could sit on the ledge in front of the window. My friends and I would sit around there just about every day and talk. It was kind of a routine, or a before-school hangout spot for us. It overlooked part of the parking lot and also the softball field next to the school to the east. We could also see the sun rising, and it lit up the inside really well. One day, I arrived at school, went upstairs to my locker, and then over to my friends by the window. There were about 5 of us or so there, and we chatted until the warning bell sounded. When we did, we all started to disperse to our classes. The hallways had been really crowded, but things were quickly becoming more quiet. I looked out the window and saw a few kids hurrying in at the last minute to make it to class. Then I saw this one guy hurry into the school. He was too old to be a student, and I didn't recognize him as a teacher. I thought maybe he was a substitute at first, but he was not dressed for the part. He just wore an old baggy-looking sweatshirt and sweatpants. He entered the school on the floor below, and then I headed to my class. I walked through the hallways down towards the other end. My classroom really wasn't that far away, and it was also on the second floor. As I got there, I noticed down at the end of the hallway, the same guy who I had seen entering the school was now coming up to the top of the stairs. I went into my classroom at that point. Class went on as usual, as did my next few classes after that. Then came lunch period. I remember that as I was sitting with a couple of my friends at a table, I saw the guy again. He walked briefly into the lunchroom and then out another way. I was surprised to see him again, and I also thought that it was weird that I even noticed. The school that I went to was pretty large, with a lot of students, and it would be easy to blend in with the crowd. Later in the day, in my last hour, we were in class, and about halfway through, the phone in the classroom then rang. Our teacher picked it up at the desk. Afterwards, he told us that the school was being locked down. We had to get up and move to the back end of the classroom. Then he locked the doors and turned out the lights to the classroom. We were all really confused. I didn't even think about the guy that I kept seeing around the school earlier. I was as clueless as everybody else. All of us in the class were talking to each other, wondering what was going on. Nobody knew, though. The teacher wouldn't tell us either. He just said for us to keep calm and to be quiet. About an hour went by, and finally, the lockdown was lifted. We still didn't know what was going on. School was let out, and we all went home. I rode the bus, and when I got home, my mom was there and asked me about the lockdown. I guess she had heard more about it than I did. I found out that a man, the same one who I had seen multiple times in the school, was the cause of it. During the last class period of the day, he was seen suspiciously walking down a hallway. The school was then locked down. Police were called, but unfortunately, the man was able to escape through an open window. Nobody knew who he was. I told my mom that I had seen the guy enter the school and had seen him again later multiple times. It blew my mind that the guy was able to fly under the radar for so long. He had been there since the start of the school day, but it wasn't until the last hour that anybody seemingly noticed him. I'm just glad that the guy didn't cause any harm. I don't know who he was or what he was doing.
So this story took place just a few weeks ago. It's really bizarre and also scary. I play in a fantasy football league with a bunch of my friends. If anybody doesn't know, in fantasy football, you draft players that are in the NFL, and based on their performances for the week, your team gets points. Your team plays another team every week. There's playoffs and a championship game at the end. Well, in the league that I play with my friends, whoever gets last place in the league has to get punished. Before the season starts, people think of ideas for punishments, and we vote on it and decide it. So everybody knew that this year, our punishment was to dress up as a clown. Then the loser would have to walk down one of the busiest streets in our nearby city. Thankfully, I didn't lose, but one of my best friends, Ben, did. My friend Jordan and I decided to go with him for his punishment. We were going to record it and send it to everybody else in the league. We first went to a party supply store and bought a cheap clown mask and costume. Then we wrote on a piece of cardboard, "I suck at fantasy football." We then drove to the city, which was about 15 minutes away. It's a pretty large city and also very busy. When we got there, the sun was setting, but there was still a lot of people out. Ben reluctantly put on his loser clown outfit, and we were laughing like crazy. We parked in this little parking lot on the edge of downtown, and then walked several blocks. When we got into the heart of the city, Ben had to walk the entire way down the street and back. He kept trying to negotiate and make it a shorter walk, but it was our responsibility to make sure that the punishment was fulfilled. Ben walked on the sidewalk, and people were staring at him. We laughed and got our pictures and videos. Then we started to head back. When we did, though, we noticed that there was another person dressed as a clown. It was really strange to see. I mean, there were a lot of people around, but I didn't expect to see someone else who looked like a clown. Obviously, we had to have Ben go over and say hi to the other clown. We walked over, and when we got over to him, saw that his mask and costume was a lot better than Ben's. He didn't really seem amused, though. The other clown just kind of stood there. Ben attempted a handshake with the other clown, but he left him hanging. He wasn't saying anything either, so we just left. We started walking back to our car, which would take probably less than 5 minutes or so. We walked along the sidewalk, away from where most of the people were. It was a much quieter area where we parked. About a minute into the walk, Jordan said that the clown appeared to be following us. I looked back and saw him walking behind us, but a long ways away. We all found this funny and figured that the guy was just joking around. We kept walking, and surprisingly, the clown remained behind us. Eventually, we crossed the street and had to go just another block to get to the car. When we crossed the street, it was much quieter, and hardly anybody else was around. The clown then crossed the street as well. He appeared to be getting closer. I found it a little bit strange that he was still behind us. Soon we made it to the parking lot, and at that point, saw the clown had started to run after us. We all hurried to get inside of the car.
We were laughing, but I honestly found it a little bit creepy. I have a smaller SUV, and I was driving, with Jordan in the passenger seat and Ben in the back. I started the car and then watched and laughed as the clown kept running after us. When the clown reached the parking lot, he stopped. I started driving out, and we would have to go right past him. He was now standing by the exit. When I was starting to drive by the clown, he turned and faced us. Then I saw him pulling something out of his pocket. I didn't know what it was because I looked away to focus on the road. But the next thing I knew, I heard a loud noise come from the back of the car and a crashing of glass. Then I heard Ben say that the clown threw a brick at us. I drove out of there, and the back window was half smashed. Everybody in the car was fine, and Ben didn't get any glass on him or anything. We called the police, though, and reported the clown, and were glad to get away from him. I thought he was harmless. It was creepy that he followed us, but we had no idea that he would pull a brick out and throw it at us. The whole situation is so crazy, I wouldn't believe it if I wasn't there myself. It made for the most memorable fantasy football punishment ever.
I used to work at Burger King. I worked there for almost a year, and this was in 2019 mainly, so it's been a little while now. During one of my late night shifts, I had a horrifying experience. I remember that I was working until close, which was 11 p.m. at our location at the time. Things would generally be very quiet for the last couple of hours. We would only get a few customers here and there. On this night, nobody had come inside the restaurant at all during the last hour. When it was finally time to close, I went over and locked the doors. Then I was told to make sure that the rest of the dining area was clean. I changed the garbages that were pretty full, and then noticed that the floor was a little dirty, so I got a broom to sweep it. I started towards the front counter and made my way back into the dining room. Our restaurant was pretty standard, but a little bit outdated. There were a few sort of smaller dividing walls inside of the dining room, so there could be more tables. I remember that I made it around one of the corners and was sweeping, when I realized that there was a man on the ground. He was all the way on the floor, but it looked like he was hiding. He wasn't laying down, but like crouched all the way to the floor. The location that he was in was a pretty good hiding spot, to be honest. I had no idea that he had been there. When I saw him, I jumped back. I didn't say anything because I was too shocked to speak. The guy then started getting up. He faced away from me, and I didn't get a good look at his face at all. He was pretty small, though. After getting up, the man started running over to the front counter. Finally, I was able to speak, and I yelled that we were closed and he had to leave now. The guy made it to behind the counter and then hid behind it. There were two other people working, and they were both in the back kitchen area. I walked over to the counter a little bit closer to the man and yelled at him to leave. I heard the other employees start to walk over, and then the man spoke. He yelled loudly, "I'm warning you, get away from me." I heard the other employees walking away, and then the back door to the restaurant opening. The other employees must have been leaving out the back. I backed away and decided that I should leave as well and call the police. I ran out the door and into the parking lot where my car was. When I got outside, I looked back and saw the man through the window. He had stood up from behind the counter and appeared to be trying to open the cash register. I saw the other employees getting in their cars, and I got inside mine. Then I called the police. I felt obligated to wait there until they arrived because the other employees left. I waited and was sort of afraid that the man would run out at me or something, but he didn't. He stayed inside the restaurant all the way until the time the police got there. When they did, they entered the restaurant and came out with the man a short time later. I guess his plan the whole time was to hide inside until we were all gone and then steal from the cash register. Unfortunately for him, he was spotted. He tried to get what he could anyways, but was caught. This was by far the scariest experience that I had working there. This happened just a few months ago. It was late at night and I was driving home after work. I was hungry and there weren't a whole lot of options anymore at that hour. I pulled off the highway and looked for any open restaurant. Soon I saw a Burger King that appeared to be open. I pulled off the road and into the quiet parking lot. As I pulled in, I saw about 2 or 3 other cars scattered around. I also happened to notice a man standing sort of by one of the other cars, but a few feet away from it. He was looking at me the whole time as I drove into a parking space. I parked and then saw that the man was walking closer to me. I'm not going to lie, I had the thought to just start my car right back up and drive away. I just found it weird that a random guy was approaching my car late at night in a Burger King parking lot. But I was hungry, and I figured that it wasn't a big deal. I opened up my door and got out of my car. When I started walking to the restaurant, the man stopped me. He said hi and that he needed a favor. I said hi to the man and asked him what he wanted. The guy then asked me to give him some money. I said no pretty quickly. The guy didn't really look homeless to me. I guess it was possible, but I just didn't want to give him any money. He didn't give me a reason why or anything either. I walked past him and saw the man instantly start walking over to my vehicle. I thought that he would go back to where he had been. When I made it inside the Burger King, I looked out the window and saw that the man was now standing right at my driver's door. I watched him try to open my driver's door and then try to open the back door as well. I couldn't believe the nerve on this guy. I started to head out the doors again to try to stop him. That's when I saw the man reach into his coat pocket and pull something out. It was some type of blunt object, but I couldn't get a good look at it. My best guess is that it was some type of a hammer. The man then struck my car window with it a few times, and the window eventually shattered. I saw him reaching inside of my car. At that point, I didn't want to leave the restaurant anymore. In fact, I went to the whole other side of it and then got out my phone and called the police. I wanted to get away from the guy. I told the police the situation and what was going on. A few minutes later, I went back over to look, and the man was gone. The police arrived after, and I filled out a report. My car had a busted window, and some things in the interior were messed up. However, I didn't have much of anything that was of value inside. I still can't believe the guy did that. It made me angry, but I was glad he didn't harm me at all. Since that experience, I haven't returned yet to that Burger King. I used Facebook Marketplace to try to sell my car. I had an old SUV that I was trying to see what I could get for. I had recently gotten a newer vehicle. I knew that my SUV wasn't worth all that much and was just asking $3,000 for it. It ran fine, but had a lot of miles and was older. I took some pictures and then listed it on Facebook Marketplace. Within days, I had some interest in the car. The very first person to contact me about it was a woman named Annie. She told me that she was very interested and would like to come over and take a look at the car. I told her that she could come by any time the next day because I didn't have anything going on. She suggested 8 p.m. and I agreed to it. So the next night, I got the car out of the garage and onto the driveway. Now, I live in a very quiet neighborhood with a little bit more space. My driveway is pretty long, so I put the SUV I was selling about halfway down. At 8 o'clock, a van pulled up in front of the bushes at the end of my front yard. I figured this had to be Annie. Sure enough, a woman got out that resembled the profile picture. She had blonde hair that was decently long and was wearing a black coat. She walked up to me by the car and we shook hands. Then she began looking at the vehicle. After about 5 minutes, she asked if we could go for a test drive, and I agreed. She got in the driver's seat and I got in the passenger's. Then she backed out of the driveway, and I suggested that we should just drive around the neighborhood a little bit. The roads around there were usually very quiet and pretty easy to drive on. So we left and drove around my neighborhood for a little while. The test drive went as expected. Annie asked several basic questions about the car and seemed to be genuinely interested in it. I answered her questions, and I really thought that I might be able to sell the car to her. She drove the car pretty well, and after about 15 minutes, we headed back to my house. When we got there, she pulled back into the driveway and parked the car where it had been. After we got out of the car, she gave the keys back to me and said that she would have to think about it. I understood. I was a little bit disappointed, but buying a car is a big decision, so I really wasn't that let down or anything. I told her to let me know if she wanted it, and then we shook hands again and said bye to each other. Then I went back inside of my house as Annie drove away. After getting back inside of my house, though, almost instantly I heard something. Now, I live alone and don't have any pets, so I didn't know what on earth the noise could have been. Then I heard footsteps coming from inside. They were in the other room, as I was just inside of the living room. It sounded like it was coming from possibly the kitchen, and there was no doubt that somebody else was in my house with me. I called out, asking if anybody was there. Things were just silent. I yelled loudly, asking if anybody was inside my house, and said that I was calling the police if they were. After yelling that, I backed away towards my front door. I could leave the house if somebody was in here and came after me. My heart was racing, and I didn't really know what to do, because clearly somebody else was inside. Then I heard the back door to my house that goes to the patio open up. This was still out of my view, so I couldn't see anything. The door then shut, and I stayed where I was. I wasn't 100% sure that whoever was in the house had actually left. Probably 10 seconds later, as I still stood in the living room by the front door to my house, I heard a noise coming from outside and behind me. It was coming from the driveway, and I looked and saw a man sprinting down my driveway. He was running so fast, plus the sun had just set, so I couldn't get a good description of him. The only thing I could really tell was that he was a grown man in dark clothing. After he sprinted to the end of the driveway, my jaw dropped. I watched him quickly jump into the back seat of a car that had just come to a stop on the side of the road in front of my house. The car was the same van that Annie had been driving. After he got inside, the van violently screeched away. It was only then that I looked around my entire house to make sure that nobody else was there. They were gone, but I had several things stolen from me. Some cash from my bedroom, a watch, my old iPhone that I didn't use anymore, and a couple of other small things. I called the police, and they came out a short time later. I told them everything, but unfortunately, I didn't get the license plate to the van. Annie, if that was even her name, blocked me on Facebook, but I gave what I could to the police. The way the intruder got in the house was my own fault. I had left my garage door open when I was gone, and the door to the house from the garage was unlocked. I felt really stupid for that. But my neighborhood is always very quiet, and my garage is so far back in the driveway, I never felt in danger if it was open. I guess the guy was in Annie's van, and when we left for the test drive, he got out and just walked right in. I learned not to invite anybody that I didn't know to my house after this. From that point forward, when I tried selling my car, I had them meet me at a local business or something. If you use any websites like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, I would advise you to learn from my mistake and meet in a public location if you have to meet at all.
This is something that happened when I was a kid. I was probably like 12, and back then I would ride the bus to and from school every day. My parents both worked until 5 and would get home between 5:30 and 6. But I would get home at about 2:45 to 3 p.m. from school every day, so usually I had a few hours by myself. One day, the school bus dropped me off at the end of my street like every other day. I walked on the sidewalk until I got to my house and then went inside. My after-school routine was usually to go to my room and try to get my homework out of the way first. Then I would relax and do whatever I wanted until my parents got home. This time, I did my homework on the kitchen table. As I was doing it, I remember looking outside the window and seeing a man walking out front on the sidewalk. He walked past our house, and I didn't think much of it. We usually wouldn't get too many people walking down the sidewalk, but an occasional person wasn't a big deal. But I later saw him walking by the other way again like 10 minutes later, and he kind of looked over. Still, it wasn't a huge deal. The kitchen was at the front of the house, and after I finished my homework, it was probably like 4 p.m. Then I moved into the living room and turned on the TV. Just a few minutes later, I heard our front door opening. Now I knew instantly that it probably wasn't either of my parents. I'm not sure how I knew that, but I just had a bad feeling. They were rarely home that early, and when they were, they would usually let me know. Then I realized that I forgot to lock the front door when I got home that day. I jumped up off the couch and didn't know what to do. I ended up going right behind the couch to hide. I had no time to go anywhere else. The person walked inside and was in the kitchen for about a minute. Then I heard their footsteps moving closer, and then they entered the living room where I was. My heart was beating like crazy. There was a little bit of space between the couch and the walls behind it, and that's where I was laying on the carpet. I couldn't see anything, and my head was down. And now that the person was walking on carpet, I couldn't hear their footsteps anymore. I tried my best to be as silent as I possibly could. The seconds felt like minutes. I didn't hear anything and was afraid that whoever was in here knew that I was there. But then I heard footsteps again in the kitchen. The footsteps soon moved to the stairs, and I heard the person walking up. I was slightly relieved, but there was still somebody in our house. I thought about hiding there until the person left, but when they reached the top of the stairs, I realized that I could probably leave. If I got up and ran now, I should be able to reach the front door before the person could. I couldn't really hear their footsteps anymore now that they were upstairs, so I didn't know exactly where they were. I carefully got out from behind the couch and stood up. Then, as quietly as I could, ran for the front door. I opened it and went outside. From there, I ran down the street to one neighbor that my family was pretty good friends with. I knocked on her door, and luckily she answered. She let me come inside, and then she called the police. It was great to finally be safe again, but the person was still in my house. The police response time was really fast. They were there within probably 5 minutes. My neighbor and I watched from her window when they got there. They soon entered our house and searched it. Unfortunately, the person was gone. I went back to the house with police, and everything was in order, except for my bedroom door upstairs, which was open. That gave me an eerie feeling. Then, not too long after, I found out that the police had found a suspicious man in another neighbor's backyard. When I saw what he looked like, it was the same guy that I had seen walking on the sidewalk earlier. I couldn't believe it. He later admitted to being inside of our house. My parents got home a short time later, and the police stayed for a while talking with everyone. Soon they left though, and things got back to normal for the most part. That experience made me not want to be home by myself for a while though. It also made me remember to always lock the door.
I work at a clothing store and have worked there for about a year now. I live by myself in an apartment and am a graduate student in college. This story occurred just a few months ago. So one night I was by myself at home doing some studying. I was in the bedroom of my small apartment. The apartment's cheap and has a bedroom, living room, kitchen, and bathroom. It opens right up to the outside, and there are no hallways, so I was always slightly concerned for security reasons after moving in. But to that point, everything had gone fine. So as I was in my bedroom studying, I heard a knock at my front door. I had been really focused, so it took me by surprise. I looked at my phone to see the time. It was almost 11 o'clock. I wondered who it could be. I got up and walked over towards my doorway, but before opening the door, I checked out the kitchen window. I saw a man standing there, but couldn't see his face from the angle that I was at. I didn't know who would come knocking at my door though at this hour. Then I went over to the peephole and looked. I saw the man's face now and did not recognize him at all. I wondered who he was and why he was at my place. He knocked again, and I ignored it. I waited there, hoping that he would leave, but he remained there for several minutes. At last, about 5 minutes later, he left. He walked away, back into the parking lot, and then went out of my sight. It was really strange to have somebody knocking on my door so late at night, and nobody else had knocked on my door that I didn't know before. I figured that it was probably somebody who had the wrong address or apartment. After that, I finished my studying and then went to bed. The next day, I had work in the afternoon into the night. That day, I was in the store and organizing different sections. I moved around a lot and did pretty much whatever was asked of me. The store was not all that busy, and I remember at one point seeing a man and recognizing him from something. It only took a few seconds, and I quickly realized that he was the same man that had been at my apartment the night before. When I realized this, my heart started racing. Why was he here? This couldn't be just a coincidence, could it? As I folded some clothes, the man was about 20 feet away from me, seemingly looking at a jacket. He kind of looked over and then looked away when he saw that I was looking in his direction. It was very suspicious. I just kept working and didn't really know what to make of this. The man soon walked away. After that, I did not see him for the rest of my shift. I worked for several more hours and then got off at I think like 7 or 8 p.m. I don't remember exactly what time it was. When I was done though, I drove home and got back to my apartment about 10 minutes later. I entered the parking lot, which was not all that big. I parked in a space that I usually did, and we didn't have assigned parking spaces, and you didn't need passes either. You could just park wherever you wanted. I was about to get out of my car when I saw a car parked a little ways down, and a man was in the driver's seat. It appeared to be the same guy that I kept seeing. I really didn't think that he lived here. I also didn't know why he would just be sitting in his car. I decided to hold off on going inside. Instead, I wanted to see what he would do. For the next 10 minutes, I just sat in my car going on my phone and looking up occasionally. Each time that I did, the man was still inside of his car. I found this to be too suspicious,
and I texted a friend and asked if I could come over. Luckily, my friend said yes, and was not that far away either. I left the parking lot and started to drive away. That's when I saw the man start leaving. This is where I got a little bit lucky. I had to cross somewhat of a busy road, and did so just in time before several cars came. By the time the guy got to the end of the parking lot to cross, he was unable to go across the street like I just had. I got away and went to my friend's. I stayed there until late that night. When I got back to my apartment at about midnight, luckily I didn't see the guy. I didn't see his car in the parking lot either. For the next few days, I didn't see him at all, until one night when I was working again. It was kind of the same situation as before. I was sort of in the back corner of the store organizing some things. I noticed the man walking into the area. He seemed to be pretending to look at some products. This made me angry, and I confronted him. I walked right up to him and said, "You need to leave me alone. If I see you one more time, I will call the police, and I'm dead serious." He played dumb, going, "Whoa, what are you talking about?" I didn't bother to explain. I didn't have to. I just walked away and went back to work. The guy mumbled under his breath, but I didn't hear what he said. After that, though, he seemed to leave the store because I didn't see him for the rest of my shift. After that night, I never saw him again either. I'm not sure if my threatening to call the police on him scared him, or if he just thought that I hadn't known that he was following me, and the fact that I now knew that he was might have caused him to stop. Either way, I'm glad that he did, and I hope that I never see him again.
This story took place a few years ago now. I know looking back that the situation could have been handled better on my part. I feel sort of dumb even telling it, but I want other people to hear it, so maybe they learn from my mistakes. I was 19 years old and was at my parents' house. My older sister and her boyfriend were staying over, and we lived in a very populated neighborhood. There are lots of houses on my street, and many other streets nearby as well. Our house is sort of at the end, and probably the biggest one. So we were hanging out one night, and our plan was to get pizza. My mom made the order, and I offered to go pick it up. I had recently gotten a new car, and I really enjoyed driving it. I know that we could have had the pizza delivered, but we would always just go get it. The pizza place was just a little over 5 minutes away, so it wasn't a big deal. Plus, we could save money on the tip. So I left the house at some time after 7 p.m. The sun had set, and it was pretty dark out by now. I went out to my car and was parked at the top of our driveway. Then I backed out and into the street. As soon as I finished backing out, I saw a car parked on the side of our street with its headlights on a little ways back. There were not a lot of cars parked on the side of the street typically, but it was also not that uncommon. When I started driving away, I saw the car start driving as well, but behind me. I approached the stop sign at the end of our street, and when I reached it, the car was right behind me. I turned, and so did the car. It was the close following distance that really made me take notice of it, though. I was driving the normal way to the pizza place, and when I made the first turn, the car behind me did it as well, but like right up on my bumper. I continued down the street a little ways, and at the next turn, once again, the car did the same thing. That's when I went from thinking maybe it was an overly aggressive driver to somebody deliberately following me. I had absolutely no clue why anybody would want to follow me, though. I turned again and sort of pulled over to the side of the road. I wanted the car to go around me, but no. Instead, it started pulling over as well. Then I started to panic. I had no clue what to do, so I got out my phone and I called my mom. When she answered, I told her that I was being followed and I wasn't sure what to do. As I was talking, I kept making random turns and the car would do the same. I was kind of trying to lose the car, but I wasn't doing a very good job. My mom told me to come back home, and if the car was still following me when I got back, she would call the police. So I kept driving and now headed back for home. It took about 5 minutes or so, and the car was behind me the entire time. When I got back to our street, I pulled into the driveway. The car did not pull in after me, but instead drove a little ways down. It appeared to park in the same spot that it was at before on the side of the road. After I parked my car, I got out and sprinted for the front door. I got back inside and then showed my parents from the window where the car was. It was still parked there. We couldn't quite see the license plate though, but we called the police. About 5 minutes later, the car drove away. When the police got there a little while after, it was gone, and I talked to them and told them my story. We were all very disappointed that the car had gone away, and after the police left, I was really nervous that it would have come back. After that, though, I never saw it again. Looking back, I should have drove to a police station when the car started following me. I could have called the police as well. I probably shouldn't have gone back home, but I guess the car already did know where I lived. I'm still not sure exactly what was going on there, though, or what he wanted from me. I used to work at Walmart. I worked there for about 6 months, and I mostly just stocked shelves. I also worked past close often and would work overnights. The job was pretty easy, and I would usually get there at about 10 o'clock at night and work until 6 a.m. The store closed at 11 p.m., so for about an hour I would be working with customers in the store, although generally there were very few of them at that hour. Our particular location was probably one of the quieter ones. We were always hiring and often a little bit short-staffed, even with it being one of the quieter Walmarts. I imagine that some other Walmarts probably have lots more employees than we did. One night, I got to work at 10 o'clock and had some boxes of items to stock shelves with in the grocery area. At around midnight, I was by myself in one of the back grocery aisles. It was mostly quiet in the immediate area where I was, but out of nowhere, I heard something fall off of seemingly one of the top shelves in the next aisle over. I thought this was weird, and I stopped what I was doing to go see. I figured that another coworker was there for some reason. When I walked around the corner and looked into that aisle, I didn't see anybody at all. I went back to what I was doing and continued with work. For the next 10 minutes or so, everything was normal. But then, out of nowhere, I saw this guy walk into my view for just a second. He was passing by my aisle and did not appear to be an employee, but I only saw him for like a second. I got up and walked over. When I looked around the corner, I saw him disappearing into another aisle. I called out asking who was there, but got no response. I decided to go and see who it was. I walked over and into the aisle where the guy went. When I looked down this one, though, I didn't see anybody. It was really strange because I didn't hear him leave the aisle. I was sure that he was there. I kept looking down that aisle, and then I saw him. He was hiding within the aisle on the bottom shelf. He was mostly covered by boxes and was about halfway down. I just barely saw his head peeking out between the boxes. It was a really strange sight. I should have just walked away and found my boss, but I decided to call out to the man again and ask him what he was doing. When I did, he did not move or answer me. I told him that he had to leave and we were closed. I don't think this really had much of an effect on him, though. He remained hidden, even though I knew where he was, and he also knew that. I left at that point to find my boss. I walked a ways away, and I let him know that there was somebody hiding in one of the aisles. We both walked back over to the aisle where the man was, but when we got there, we were just in time to see him running away. He went sprinting out of the aisle and out of both of our sights. We briefly walked over to where he had gone, but he had been running pretty fast. My boss told me that it would be taken care of, and I could go back to work. As my boss walked away, I heard him radioing in to somebody else, and I felt at ease about the situation. I went back to work after, like usual. I stocked shelves for the next hour and a half or so. But then, as I was over there by myself, I heard a noise of somebody approaching me. I turned around and once again was expecting to see a coworker, but I saw the same guy. Somehow, he was still here. I thought my boss told me he was going to take care of it. The guy startled me, and I got up and immediately started running away. It was the only thing that I could think to do. The crazy part is the man actually started running after me. He gave chase as I ran past several aisles before finding a coworker. When another coworker saw us, the man finally diverted and ran into another direction. At that point, both my coworker and I went in the opposite direction of the guy. The police ended up being called, and a bunch of us employees were evacuated from the store. When the police got there, they went inside and were able to catch the man after probably 10 minutes. I'm not sure how, but the guy had been able to elude everyone for several hours. He stayed in the store after closing, and nobody was able to kick him out. He would hide in the store and move around when nobody was watching him. What his ultimate plan was, I don't know. It really creeped me out, though. I'm glad that I saw him when I did. I'm not even sure why he was approaching me. One of the scariest moments of my life happened when I went to Target last year. I went there one night to do some normal grocery shopping. There's a Target not that far at all from where I live, and I go there almost weekly. So I got there sometime at night, and I don't recall exactly when. I went inside, got a cart, and then started getting my items. I was inside of the store probably for about 20 minutes shopping at least. Then I finally checked out and left the store. I headed back to my car, which I had parked not even that far away. But when I arrived at my vehicle, which is a pretty normal sedan, something happened. I was behind it and about to go around and put the groceries in the back seat. That's when I saw somebody looking at me through the back window from inside my car. It was a man, and I didn't see him well at all because he ducked down less than a second after I saw him. I freaked out and left the cart there and went running back inside of the Target. After making it back inside, I dialed 911 to call the police. I told them that somebody was inside my car at the Target. Then I waited inside the store for the police to arrive. It took probably less than 5 minutes for them to get there, but in the meantime, when I was waiting, I was standing just a little ways inside of the Target near the first aisle. As I was waiting for the police, I was sure that I saw the guy that was in my car enter the store. He immediately walked to the right and didn't appear to notice me. I wasn't 100% sure, because like I said, I only saw him for probably less than a second inside my car window, but I was probably about 80% sure. I went down one of the aisles in case he was looking for me or something. A short time later, the police arrived. I went out of the store with them and we checked my vehicle. Whoever was inside of it was now gone, but my doors were all unlocked. I must have somehow forgot to lock them when I went inside of Target. I didn't have anything inside my car worth stealing though. I usually kept it pretty empty and clean. Still, what was a random man doing inside of my car? I had never seen him before. I gave his description to the police, and I also let them know that I thought I saw him inside Target. I made it clear that I wasn't 100% sure, but I was pretty certain that it was him, and it made me think that it was more likely to be him after knowing he wasn't in my car anymore. The man had dark hair, was sort of short, and wearing a tan t-shirt and jeans. He also appeared to be pretty young, in probably his 20s or maybe early 30s. The police told me that they would go into Target and see if he was still there. I stayed by my car talking to another officer for maybe 5 or 10 more minutes. Another officer said they did not locate the man inside Target and figured that he must have left. They said they would take one more look around the store and I could go home if I wanted to. At that point, I finally left to drive home. Now, the Target that I go to is near a lot of other stores, but the way that I exit is I drive down the road to the side of Target. Then I go down this quiet road that leads to more stores about a quarter mile down the road. When I was driving down that road, I saw this guy randomly walking alongside of it. It was weird because there was no sidewalk there and it wasn't very well lit, so you wouldn't really expect people to walk along it. Just seconds later is when I realized that it was the same guy. As I was approaching him, he turned and saw me. That's when he bolted out onto the street suddenly. It was like he was running towards me, and I veered to the right to avoid him. I wasn't going very fast, but luckily he didn't get to me, and I was able to successfully get around him. Then I sped away from him as he stood in the road. No other cars were nearby, and I got out my phone and called the police to report the guy. After that, I was finally able to make it back home okay. Looking back, I still can't believe that it happened. I avoided that Target for weeks after the events. Finally, I was able to go back, and I still shop there sometimes. Nothing like that has happened, and I haven't seen the guy either. I'm hoping that whoever he was, the police found him, or he stopped his wild behavior.
When I went to college, I went to a large university with about 40,000 students. It was a big campus, and I went there for 4 years. For some more background, I'm a female, and this happened in my junior year. It was in the fall, and had been a pretty normal school year to that point. During that time, I lived a little ways off campus in an apartment that I rented with 2 other roommates. Most of the classes that I went to had quite a few other students in them. We would have class in large rooms with many seats, and it was hard to know all of the other students in each class. In one class that I had, I usually got there early and sat in the same spot. It was kind of towards the back and on one end near the aisle. I would be one of the first students to class, and a few weeks into the semester, a guy started sitting next to me. He also started talking to me every time that he sat there, and I wasn't happy about this. He was rude and annoying and wouldn't leave me alone. He never introduced himself to me, but I found out that his name was Jake. Every time that he talked to me, he would say that I should come over to his place, and I would always say no to him. It only went on for like 2 weeks when he would sit by me. It felt like longer though, because he would never pay attention to class like I tried to. He would talk to me, or just go on his phone, and it was really distracting. When I told him that he was being annoying, he didn't stop until like the 5th time that I told him. He finally did stop though, and also stopped showing up to class. I would see him after class though, and he kept trying to talk to me. Soon though, I stopped seeing him altogether. I didn't really know anything about him, but once I stopped seeing him, I was glad. I didn't give it much more thought. But no more than a week after I stopped seeing him altogether, he began reaching out to me on social media. He first added me on Snapchat. I'm not sure how he got my username, but after he added me, I added him back, not knowing that it was the same Jake. When he started snapping me, I realized who it was. I did not reply, and I deleted him. He then moved to Instagram and started sending me direct messages. I didn't respond, and then he started sending me texts. I had no interest in him at all, so I blocked him on all platforms. Now, it wasn't just the fact that I didn't like him. He came across as really sketchy. Something about him definitely gave me a bad feeling. After I blocked him, I thought that my problems were over. I figured the guy would leave me alone and move on. For several days, I didn't hear from him or see him. But then, one night, I happened to be at home at my apartment by myself. Both of my 2 roommates were gone. One was at work, and the other was at her boyfriend's. There was then a knock on the door. It was like 9 o'clock at night, so this was kind of weird. Our apartment was on the 2nd level of 2, but it also opened up to the outdoors and a walkway. It was kind of like a motel if I had to describe it, but it was apartments. I walked over and looked out the window to see Jake standing there. I had a really bad feeling right away. How did he know where I lived? I had no idea, but there was no way that I was answering the door for this guy. My first thought was to try and ignore it. I calmly walked away into the hallway and then my bedroom. I heard the knocking again coming from the front door, but I still ignored it. After probably 5 minutes of not hearing any more knocking sounds, I left my bedroom. But when I got into the living room, I saw Jake standing there, but leaning down and looking into our window. We had some curtains, but they didn't really cover the whole window. It wasn't that hard to see in. He was looking right at me. My first reaction was to move quickly back into my bedroom. As I was walking away, he started banging on the glass. I had a really bad feeling and was afraid that he was going to break in. He banged on the glass again, even harder than before. At that point, I decided to call the police. Clearly, he could see that I did not want to talk to him and I wanted him to go away. I dialed 911 and hid in my bedroom as I told the operator the situation and what was going on. I was told that the police would be there shortly. Meanwhile, I wasn't really hearing anything like knocks on the window or door. I got curious as I waited and went out into the hallway and looked around the corner. When I did, I saw that he was still there and looking through the window like before. I went back into my bedroom and did not come out until I was sure that the police were there. They arrived pretty fast, and Jake was still at my door. I heard them talking to him and went into my living room. They basically talked to Jake and told him not to bother me again in any way. He agreed, and then they sent him on his way. Then I talked to the officers and told them about what had happened. I hoped that this incident would cause Jake to leave me alone once and for all, and for the next week or so, I did not see him or hear from him. I thought that everything was good again. Probably like a week and a half later, I had a normal school day. I went to one of my classes like I always did. Maybe 10 minutes into it, I heard this weird noise come over the class speakers. The professor stopped what he was doing and then went to look at his phone. There was then an announcement that campus was being locked down. This seemed really strange, and everyone was confused. All of the people in the class seemingly started talking at once. The professor walked over to all of the doors, closed them, and locked them. He told us that we could not leave until the lockdown was over. I tried to find out what was going on, but nobody really seemed to know anything. This went on for probably 30 minutes or longer. Finally, it was over and the professor ended class early. After that, I went home. I found out that the lockdown was caused when somebody spotted a man who happened to be Jake walking on campus, but he was seen with what appeared to be a gun. It was reported, and there was immediately a lockdown followed by an investigation. I guess Jake tried to go in a building that was locked and then left campus, but police caught up with him after a campus security guard saw him walking away. Nobody was harmed or anything, but Jake didn't even go to our school. I couldn't help but wonder if he was trying to go after me. I had, after all, called the police on him. Luckily, though, he was spotted pretty quickly and nothing happened. It still really creeps me out to think about it, though.
This happened back when I was younger. I believe that I was about 14 at the time. I remember it pretty well, and it all started on a Friday night. My parents were going out of town to go to a wedding that I was not invited to. I didn't care though. I found weddings boring and would rather stay home and play video games. My parents left on Friday afternoon after I got back from school. I was sort of excited to have the house to myself for a little while. My mom let me order a pizza to be delivered that night, and I got it and then watched TV in the living room. Maybe an hour into that, at like 8 p.m. or so, there was a knock at the front door. I didn't know who it could possibly be. I felt a little bit nervous as I got up from the couch to go check. I looked out of a window and saw a man standing there. He was not a neighbor, and I didn't know him at all. The man was wearing a black jacket and like a winter hat. He also had a slight beard. There was no way that I was answering the door though. He knocked again, and I just stood there waiting for him to go away. I was pretty confident that he couldn't see me from where I was. Eventually, I saw the man turn and walk away. I was a little bit creeped out, and I didn't know who the guy was or why he came to our house, but I figured that was that, and I went back to what I was doing. Maybe 30 minutes to an hour later, I decided to go up to my room and play some video games. I went upstairs, got in my bedroom, shut off the lights, and closed the door. Then I got in my gaming chair and put my headset on. I had a pretty good setup in there and really enjoyed it. Probably 30 minutes into that, I was interrupted though. I heard a knock on the door, but it wasn't the front door to the house. It was coming from my bedroom door. My heart started racing like crazy instantly, and I became as scared as can be. I didn't know what to do. Very quietly, I got up from my chair. Then I turned the TV off. Now it was completely dark in there, and I could see very little. I was kind of expecting the door to just open, but it didn't. I got down on the ground, careful not to make any noise. My gaming chair was sort of in the corner of the room, away from the door. My closet was half open and just a few feet from me. I crawled over there quietly and careful not to make a sound. Then they knocked again. Somebody was right outside my door, and I figured that it was probably the man who had knocked on the front door earlier in the night. I was able to crawl my way into my bedroom closet. It was not that big of a closet, but enough space for me to fit inside of it. Plus, my room was pretty messy. As a teenager, I had clothes and stuff laying all around the floor, and basically a huge pile of clothes in my closet. As I went inside of it, I carefully covered myself in clothes. In the middle of doing this, I heard the door start to open. I froze and just hoped that I was not visible. I did not hear the guy walk inside, but could tell that he was in there. Then he took a couple of steps inside my bedroom. I was terrified and held my breath. He was in there for maybe 30 seconds. Then he turned and left the room, and I heard him walk out. I had just gotten a cell phone at that point, just a few months prior. I got it out and quietly dialed for the police. I was sure to make it so the guy couldn't hear me wherever he was. I whispered to the 911 operator what was going on and then hung up because I was worried that the guy would hear me. He was still upstairs, but I couldn't tell where he was. I went deeper into my closet in case the guy came back. He didn't come back in my room though. After waiting for what felt like a really long time and not hearing anything else, the police arrived. I left my closet and bedroom and saw that the police had actually caught the man. He was back downstairs, and I was told that he had been hiding in the basement. I hadn't heard him go downstairs at all, but then again, I was under a bunch of clothes in my closet. It was a huge relief. My parents were called and told about it, and they ended up coming back home that night. They got me and made me go to the wedding with them anyways because they didn't want to leave me alone. I didn't really want to be alone either. That was probably the craziest night of my life, and I will never forget it.